For centuries, merchants and travelers journeyed across vast landscapes, braving scorching deserts, towering mountains, and treacherous passes. Laden with silk, spices, and precious metals, caravans connected distant civilizations, carrying not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and beliefs. Along these routes, great cities thrived, empires rose and fell, and cultures blended in ways that shaped the world as we know it. This was the Silk Road. More than just a trade route, it was the lifeline of the ancient world. For over 1,500 years, this vast network of paths stretched from the heart of China to the shores of the Mediterranean, linking east and west in an intricate web of commerce, culture, and conquest. Silk, paper, gunpowder, and religions traveled alongside gold, ivory, and horses. It was a road of prosperity, but also of peril, where wealth and war walked hand in hand. But the Silk Road didn't emerge overnight. Long before its golden age, ancient merchants had already begun laying the groundwork for global trade. To truly understand its rise, we must journey even further back, to the earliest civilizations where the first trade routes were carved into history. Before the Silk Road, there were the markets of Mesopotamia, the ports of the Indus Valley, and the caravans of Egypt, all setting the stage for what would become the most legendary commercial network of all time. Yet for trade to truly thrive on a global scale, the scattered markets and wandering caravans needed more than just chance encounters. They required the vision and power of rulers who understood the importance of connectivity. This is where the Persian Empire, one of the first to grasp this need, stepped in with a revolutionary infrastructure project, the Persian Royal Road. Forged under the rule of Darius I in the 5th century BCE, it stretched an astonishing 2,700 kilometers from Susa, the beating heart of the Achaemenid Empire, to the distant city of Sardis in Anatolia. This vast network of roads was more than just a path for merchants and messengers. It was a revolution in connectivity. At a time when vast empires struggled with the tyranny of distance, the Persian Royal Road became a lifeline, uniting on the far reaches of Persia with the thriving civilizations of the Mediterranean. It transformed the way empires communicated, how goods moved, and how cultures intertwined. Unlike the unpredictable dirt trails of earlier trade routes, the Persian Royal Road was meticulously maintained, its surface designed for swift and uninterrupted travel. Darius I understood that an empire was only as strong as its ability to govern efficiently, and to that end, he introduced a network of relay stations known as chapars, strategically placed along the route. These stations housed fresh horses and provided resting points for couriers, ensuring that messages could traverse the empire at breathtaking speeds. Herodotus, the famed Greek historian, marveled at the efficiency of the system, claiming that Persian messengers, undeterred by darkness, storms, or obstacles, could cover the entire length of the road in just 7 days. A feat that seemed almost mythical in the ancient world. But this road was not merely the empire's nervous system, it was also the lifeblood of trade. From the bustling markets of Babylon to the coastal hubs of the Aegean, merchants laden with textiles, spices, and precious metals moved along its length. The economic activity it spurred helped solidify the Persian Empire's dominance, while its security, bolstered by guard posts and military patrols, made long-distance trade more reliable than ever before. For the first time, the exchange of goods was not limited by seasonal risks or the looming threat of bandits. The Persian Royal Road offered a corridor of stability, one that set a precedent for all major trade routes that would follow. Commerce was only one facet of its significance. The road became a channel for diplomacy, a bridge connecting civilizations. Envoys, philosophers, and scholars traveled its length, carrying with them the ideas of distant lands. The Achaemenid rulers, recognizing the power of shared knowledge, encouraged this cultural exchange. Administrative techniques, early monetary systems, and philosophical concepts moved freely across its expanse, influencing governance and intellectual thought far beyond Persia's borders. The empire's introduction of standardized coinage, one of the earliest known monetary systems, simplified transactions, transforming trade into a more structured, efficient enterprise. Yet Persia's ambitions stretched beyond economics and culture. Its vast network reshaped how empires wielded influence, not through conquest alone, but through connectivity. The Persian royal road became a model of structured trade and diplomacy, proving that power lay as much in connection as in conquest. Though Persia's dominance faded, its innovations in infrastructure, administration, and commerce left a lasting legacy. The idea of a vast interconnected trade network had taken root, and in the Far East, another empire was beginning to build upon that vision. In the heart of China, under the mighty Han dynasty, a vast trade network was emerging. Unlike Persia's single royal highway, the Han expanded outward, forging multiple interconnected routes that stretched beyond their borders. This network was not merely the result of economic ambition, but of necessity, war, and the vision of an emperor determined to link his empire to the wider world. The Han dynasty, rising to power in 206 BCE, had secured its place as one of the most formidable empires of the ancient world. Under the leadership of Emperor Wu of Han, its ambition soared to new heights. The empire flourished, its economy thrived, its administration strengthened, and its borders pushed ever outward. But prosperity came at a cost. Looming over China's northern frontier was the relentless threat of the Xiongnu, a confederation of fierce nomadic tribes who raided settlements, disrupted trade, and tested the empire's military might. Decades of warfare had failed to bring lasting peace, and Emperor Wu realized that brute force alone was not enough to subdue this formidable enemy. Seeking a more strategic approach, he turned his gaze westward, toward lands yet unexplored by Chinese envoys. If the Han Empire could forge alliances with other civilizations that had suffered under the Xiongnu's dominance, it could build a coalition strong enough to weaken them from multiple fronts. But China remained largely isolated from the world beyond its immediate borders. What lay beyond the vast deserts and towering mountain ranges remained a mystery, and in order to establish diplomatic and trade relations, the emperor needed intelligence. He needed someone who could venture into the unknown. Among his trusted officials, one name stood out: Zhang Qian, a skilled military officer and diplomat. In 138 BCE, Emperor Wu placed his trust in Zhang Qian, tasking him with a mission. The journey begins. Zhang Qian and his 100-man delegation departed from Chang'an, the heart of the Han dynasty, venturing westward into the unknown. Their journey was treacherous, taking them through the lands controlled by the formidable Xiongnu, a nomadic confederation that had long been China's most dangerous adversary. Before they could make significant progress, disaster struck. The Xiongnu ambushed Zhang Qian and his men, capturing them and imprisoning them deep within their territory. For the next 10 years, he remained a captive, stripped of his mission, but never his purpose. Forced to integrate into Xiongnu society, he learned their ways, how they fought, how they traded, and how they ruled. He even took a Xiongnu wife, a marriage of circumstance rather than choice. Yet, despite his captivity, Zhang Qian never wavered in his resolve. The mission was not over. When the moment came, he seized his chance, escaping with his wife and a handful of loyal men. Against all odds, he pressed westward, determined to reach the Yuezhi and fulfill his emperor's command. But what he found in the land of the Yuezhi was not what Emperor Wu had expected. Once a powerful nomadic tribe, the Yuezhi had been displaced by the Xiongnu years before, forced to flee westward. Now, instead of seeking vengeance, they had settled in Bactria, once a province of Alexander the Great's empire, and had embraced a new way of life. No longer warriors roaming the steppes, they had become rulers of a thriving kingdom, their lands rich with agriculture, trade, and prosperity. Zhang Qian had come to forge an alliance against the Xiongnu, but the Yuezhi had no interest in war. Their ambitions no longer lay in conquest, but in wealth, and they controlled some of the most vital trade routes linking India, Persia, and the distant Mediterranean world. It was a crushing diplomatic failure, yet Zhang Qian had stumbled upon something even more significant. China had long seen itself as the center of civilization, isolated from the world beyond its borders. But here, in the bustling cities of Bactria, Zhang Qian witnessed a revelation. the existence of an immense trade network far greater than anything China had imagined. The streets of Bactria were alive with traders from distant lands, Greeks, Persians, Indians, and Central Asians, each bringing with them goods that had traveled thousands of miles. Indian spices filled the air with their exotic scents, Persian carpets lay rolled in rich, vibrant colors, Mediterranean glassware shimmered in the sunlight, and to Zhang Qian's astonishment, there was even Chinese silk. How had silk, a fabric so closely guarded in China, made its way here? The answer was as shocking as it was illuminating. Chinese merchants had been selling their silk to middlemen traders in the borderlands, who in turn passed it further west through a vast chain of exchanges. China's most prized commodity had already reached lands no Chinese had ever set foot in, yet the Han Dynasty had no knowledge of this trade, let alone any control over it. If China could harness this network, the possibilities were endless. But Zhang Qian's discoveries in Bactria went beyond trade. He encountered the legendary Fergana horses, strong, swift, and unmatched in endurance. These heavenly horses were far superior to any found in China, capable of carrying armored warriors over long distances without tiring. Zhang Qian recognized their strategic value immediately. If China could acquire these horses, they could transform their cavalry and gain an edge over the formidable Xiongnu nomads. This revelation would later shape the ambitions of Emperor Wu, setting China on a path toward military expansion. Zhang Qian also learned of a great empire to the west, the Parthians, rulers of ancient Persia. Though he never traveled there himself, Bactrian merchants spoke of Persia's sprawling cities, its advanced infrastructure, and its position as the gatekeeper between east and west. The Parthians controlled vast territories stretching from the Iranian plateau to Mesopotamia, serving as a vital link between China and the distant Mediterranean world. This knowledge sent a ripple through Zhang Qian's mind. If China could establish direct trade with Persia, it could open the door to lands even further away, perhaps even to Rome itself. The Han Dynasty had never considered such possibilities before, but now, the idea of an interconnected world was no longer a fantasy. With his mission completed, though not in the way he had envisioned, Zhang Qian prepared for the long journey home. But fate was not yet finished testing him. On his return, he was once again captured by the Xiongnu, enduring yet another stretch of imprisonment. He had already spent 10 years in captivity during his first capture, and after escaping, he had spent additional months traveling across Central Asia. Now, after being captured again, he was held for another year. Years passed before he seized another chance to escape, and by the time he finally returned to Chang'an, 13 years had passed since he first set out. Most of his original delegation had perished, and only a handful of survivors made it back. Yet, despite everything, his journey had not been in vain. When he stood before Emperor Wu and recounted all he had seen, his revelations changed the course of history. The emperor now saw what lay beyond China's borders, not just enemies, but opportunities. Inspired by Zhang Qian's findings, the Han Dynasty took decisive action. They expanded military campaigns westward, strengthened control over trade routes, and forged new diplomatic ties with distant kingdoms. More importantly, they recognized the vast potential of the trade networks stretching across Central Asia. What began as a mission for an alliance against the Xiongnu ignited something far greater, the spark of a new era. China was no longer an isolated empire. It now stood at the crossroads of a thriving world. Zhang Qian's journey ignited three key motivations that drove China's engagement with the Western world like never before. The first was the quest for the heavenly horses. Recognizing their military value, Emperor Wu launched a campaign to acquire them, leading to the War of the Heavenly Horses 104 to 102 BCE against the Kingdom of Dayuan, Fergana. The conflict was hard-fought, with early setbacks nearly crushing Han ambitions. But after a relentless siege, China emerged victorious. The spoils of war were more than just the prized horses. They marked a realization that dominance in the region required both military strength and strategic action. With these elite Fergana horses reinforcing their cavalry, the Han Dynasty gained a decisive advantage over the Xiongnu. Their military could now counter enemy raids, adapt to nomadic warfare tactics, and assert control over the northern frontier. This victory reshaped China's military strategy, proving that force was as crucial as diplomacy in securing the empire's expansion. The second was the realization of trade's vast economic potential. His journey revealed the vast economic potential of trade with the West. Before his mission, China had little understanding of the extensive commercial networks stretching across Central Asia. But now, the Han court saw trade not as an incidental byproduct of foreign interactions, but as a powerful tool for wealth and influence. Emperor Wu recognized that silk, China's most exclusive commodity, ranked among the most sought-after luxury goods in the world. By establishing direct trade routes, China bypassed middlemen, controlled the flow of goods, and amassed extraordinary wealth. This realization propelled Han expansion into Central Asia, securing key trade hubs and transforming the Silk Road into a dominant commercial artery. What began as a diplomatic mission had evolved into something far greater, the foundation of a vast trade network that would shape global commerce for centuries. The Silk Road was not a single pathway, but a web of interconnected routes that facilitated the movement of goods, technology, and ideas across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. China exported a range of prized goods, including silk, the ultimate luxury fabric desired by elites across the world, along with jade, lacquerware, porcelain, paper, and tea. Meanwhile, Central Asia supplied China with its legendary Fergana horses, as well as wool, gold, silver, and fine leather. From India came fragrant spices, exquisite cotton textiles, Buddhist scriptures, ivory, and exotic woods. The Middle East and Persia contributed stunning glassware, precious gems, perfumes, incense, and vibrant dyes that transformed fashion across continents. Meanwhile, Europe and the Mediterranean supplied wine, intricate silverware, metalwork, olive oil, and glass beads, showcasing their craftsmanship to the east. Despite this flourishing trade, China fiercely guarded the secret of silk production. The delicate process of sericulture, raising silkworms, harvesting their cocoons, and weaving the luxurious fabric, was a highly protected state secret, and revealing it to outsiders was punishable by death. Yet, by the 1st century BCE, silk had already reached Rome, where it became the ultimate status symbol. Wealthy Romans draped themselves in silk robes, adorning their homes with the shimmering fabric, yet they remained unaware of its origins. To them, China was a mysterious and distant land, which they called Serica, the land of silk. The trade between East and West was never direct, but flowed through a network of vibrant trading cities. Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, served as the Silk Road's starting point, a thriving capital bustling with merchants, diplomats, and scholars. Farther west, the desert oasis of Dunhuang became a critical resupply station before traders braved the harsh wilderness. Kashgar, at the crossroads of major trade routes, emerged as a bustling marketplace where Chinese, Indian, and Persian traders converged. Samarkand, the gleaming jewel of Central Asia, flourished with Persian, Indian, and Chinese influences, while cities like Ctesiphon and later Baghdad became centers of intellectual and economic power in the Persian and Islamic worlds. Ultimately, Constantinople stood as the western gateway of the Silk Road, where Eastern luxuries arrived in Europe in exchange for Roman goods. The third was the cultural and global influence of the Silk Road. Through these interconnected cities, the Silk Road did more than facilitate trade. It wove together cultures, religions, and traditions, laying the foundation for global interactions that shaped history. Nowhere was this transformation more evident than in Rome. As the empire expanded, its appetite for exotic goods grew insatiable. Merchants brought treasures from the farthest reaches of the known world, dazzling the Roman elite with wonders never before seen. Among them, none was more coveted than the shimmering threads of silk, a fabric that symbolized the boundless reach of the Silk Road and the unprecedented global exchange it had set into motion. Rome's love for silk. By the 1st century BCE, Rome had reached the height of its power, stretching from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-scorched deserts of Egypt. It was a world empire, a force unmatched in military might and political influence. Yet, for all its dominance, there remained lands beyond Rome's grasp, mysterious kingdoms in the east that produced goods unlike anything found in the Western world. Exotic spices, precious gems, and rare dyes filtered into Roman markets, but among these treasures, one fabric stood above all others: silk. At first, silk arrived in Rome in small quantities, carried along treacherous trade routes by Parthian and Indian merchants. These middlemen acted as gatekeepers, fiercely protecting the secret of silk's origins. To maintain their monopoly, they spun elaborate myths, claiming that silk was harvested from distant mystical lands or even plucked from the leaves of enchanted trees. The allure of the unknown only added to the fabric's value, and the Romans, unaware of its true source, regarded it with an almost mystical reverence. The first confirmed Roman mention of silk dates back to the time of Julius Caesar, 49 to 44 BCE. During one of Caesar's grand parades, silk banners were unfurled in the streets of Rome, a dazzling display of wealth and power. It was an early indication of the fabric's growing prestige, yet at this point, silk remained a rare and luxurious commodity, reserved for only the most powerful individuals. It was during the Augustan Age, 27 BCE, 14 CE, that silk truly became a defining symbol of Roman high society. Trade between the East and West flourished like never before, and silk transformed from an exotic curiosity into a coveted status symbol. No longer confined to imperial ceremonies, the fabric now graced the wardrobes of Rome's elite. Aristocrats donned shimmering silk robes at extravagant feasts, political assemblies, and theatrical performances, their garments glowing under the flickering light of oil lamps and torches. The sight was mesmerizing, a testament to power, influence, and unrestrained luxury. It was the noblewomen of Rome who became the most fervent admirers of silk. Wealthy matrons and daughters of senators draped themselves in silk dresses so delicate and translucent that they were often deemed scandalous. Roman poets and historians frequently criticized these women for their obsession with the fabric, arguing that such revealing attire eroded the moral fabric of society. The historian Tacitus openly lamented that silk represented the decline of traditional Roman virtues, warning that it encouraged vanity, indulgence, and extravagance. Yet, despite the criticism, demand for silk only grew. The more expensive and rare the fabric, the more desirable it became. Rome's wealthiest citizens competed to acquire the finest silks, some embroidered with intricate gold patterns and others adorned with pearls and gemstones. Silk was no longer just a fabric. It had become an integral part of Roman fashion, politics, and culture, a symbol of affluence and the empire's deepening ties with the East. However, not everyone in Rome embraced this fascination with silk. Many politicians and moralists saw it as a direct threat to the traditional values that had once defined the Republic. The philosopher and statesman Cato the Elder, though he lived before silk became widely available, had long warned against the corrupting influence of foreign luxuries. He argued that true Roman virtues, discipline, frugality, and simplicity were being eroded by an insatiable hunger for extravagance. His fears were echoed by later critics who saw silk as a symbol of decadence, a distraction from the military strength and civic duty that had built Rome's empire. A more vocal opponent of silk was Emperor Tiberius, 14 to 37 CE. Alarmed by the growing obsession with the fabric, he issued a decree banning Roman men from wearing silk garments. He believed that the softness and luxury of silk weakened Rome's warriors, making them effeminate and unfit for battle. However, the ban did not extend to women, and as a result, silk continued to dominate the fashion of Rome's noblewomen, further cementing its place in elite society. As the decades passed, concerns over silk reached the Senate floor. Some senators argued that silk was draining Rome's economy, funneling vast amounts of wealth into foreign hands. Unlike other goods, silk had no direct trade exchange. Rome's economy relied on gold and silver coinage, and since China, the primary producer of silk, had little interest in Roman products, the empire had to pay for silk in bullion. This led to an alarming outflow of gold to the east, depleting Rome's precious metal reserves and destabilizing its economy. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder, 23 to 79 CE, expressed grave concerns about this economic drain, writing, "Each year, At least 100 million sesterces flow eastward to India, China, and Arabia in exchange for luxuries we do not need. Our women, in their thirst for extravagance, strip Rome of its wealth. Beyond Rome's borders, the Parthian and Kushan empires, who controlled the vital trade routes between Rome and China, profited immensely from their role as intermediaries. By inflating silk prices before it ever reached Roman markets, these empires ensured that Rome paid a heavy price for its obsession with the fabric. The Parthians in particular exploited their strategic position along the Silk Road, heavily taxing Roman merchants and manipulating the flow of trade to maximize their profits. Despite these economic pressures, however, silk remained unstoppable. No decree curbed its appeal. No philosopher dissuaded the elite from their indulgence. It was more than just fabric. It was an emblem of power, beauty, and the irresistible connection between East and West. The demand was insatiable, and as more silk flowed into Rome, so too did the economic strains it created. Rome's deep reliance on Eastern luxuries led to three major trade imbalances. First, gold continuously flowed eastward as China accumulated vast Roman wealth without sending much in return, creating a one-sided trade that drained Rome's coffers. Second, the Parthians controlled the supply chain, extracting heavy taxes from Roman merchants and ensuring they remained indispensable middlemen in this lucrative exchange. Finally, as Rome's appetite for silk soared, the empire struggled to maintain a stable currency, forcing the minting of increasingly debased coins to compensate for the loss of gold reserves. Yet, silk's impact extended far beyond commerce. It became a powerful political and diplomatic tool. Roman emperors frequently used silk garments as gifts to secure alliances and display imperial favor, sending exquisite robes to rulers in Persia, Armenia, and North Africa as tokens of goodwill and prestige. Within the military, silk took on an equally striking role, as Roman legions began using silk banners instead of wool or linen. These banners, shimmering and flowing more dramatically in the wind, created a formidable and awe-inspiring presence on the battlefield, reinforcing the might of the Roman army. Even within the brutal spectacle of gladiatorial combat, silk was woven into the fabric of Roman entertainment. Some of the wealthiest gladiators adorned their armor with silk, elevating their status and further fueling the public's fascination with this rare and exotic material. For all their obsession with silk, however, the Romans remained largely ignorant of its true origins. The Parthians, determined to protect their monopoly, shrouded the source of silk in mystery, ensuring that Rome remained dependent on their trade routes. Despite endless speculation, no Roman truly understood where silk came from. The idea that silk was painstakingly produced by tiny silkworms, nurtured by generations of Chinese artisans, was a secret so well kept that no Roman had ever reached China to uncover the truth. It wasn't until the 6th century CE, when Byzantine spies successfully smuggled silkworm eggs out of China, that the West finally learned the reality behind silk's creation. But by then, the Roman Empire had already crumbled, and its once unmatched hunger for silk had become the stuff of history. Rome's relentless demand for silk did more than just shape its own economy. It played a crucial role in the expansion of the Silk Road, strengthening connections between China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. As trade intensified, new routes emerged, extending far beyond their original paths. This surge in commerce allowed new powers to rise, none more influential than the Kushan Empire. Situated at a strategic crossroads, the Kushans became vital facilitators of East-West trade, linking China, India, Persia, and Rome into a thriving commercial network. More than just middlemen, they actively shaped the Silk Road, ensuring the steady flow of goods, knowledge, and culture across continents. Under their influence, new trade hubs flourished, and the spread of Buddhism accelerated, carried by merchants, monks, and travelers journeying between these great civilizations. Despite Rome's growing concerns over the economic drain caused by its unquenchable thirst for silk, the trade itself only intensified. Gold and silver continued to pour eastward, fueling not just the economies of China and Persia, but also strengthening the Kushans. Their empire thrived at the heart of the Silk Road, transforming into a dominant force that controlled key trade routes. Under Kushan rule, cities like Bactria and Taxila became thriving marketplaces, drawing merchants and scholars from across the known world. Bactria, located in present-day Afghanistan, emerged as one of the most significant Silk Road trade centers, while Taxila, in northern India, developed into a renowned center of learning where philosophy, commerce, and culture intertwined. These cities became melting pots of ideas, where the exchange of knowledge was just as valuable as the trade of silk and spices. The rise of the Kushan Empire between the 1st and 4th centuries CE cemented its status as one of the most important players in Silk Road trade. Originally descended from the Yuezhi, a nomadic tribe of Central Asia, the Kushans were driven southward by the expansion of the Xiongnu. As they migrated into the Indian subcontinent, they established a powerful empire that encompassed modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. Their strategic position gave them control over vast trade networks, allowing them to dominate commercial exchanges between Rome, China, and Persia. The Kushans' ability to integrate diverse cultures and economic systems made them more than just intermediaries. They were architects of an interconnected world where goods, religions, and ideas flowed freely, shaping the course of history. To further solidify their dominance in trade, the Kushans introduced a standardized currency system, issuing widely circulated gold and copper coins that facilitated transactions along the Silk Road. Their economic policies encouraged long-distance commerce by ensuring safe passage for merchants, protecting key trade routes from banditry, and maintaining infrastructure that kept the trade network secure and efficient. The stability they provided did more than just benefit traders. It reinforced the Kushan Empire's role as the linchpin of Silk Road commerce. By controlling and safeguarding these routes, they strengthened their position as the gatekeepers of East-West trade, allowing their influence to stretch across continents. But the impact of the Kushans extended beyond economic dominance. They also played a pivotal role in the spread of Buddhism along the Silk Road, turning their empire into a major center of religious transformation. Kanishka the Great, one of the most influential Kushan rulers, was a devout patron of Buddhism and actively supported its expansion across his empire. Under his reign, Buddhist scriptures were translated into Greek, allowing the religion to reach new audiences, while monastic settlements flourished along key trade routes, providing spiritual havens for travelers and merchants. The construction of Buddhist stupas at major trade centers reinforced the presence of Buddhism along the Silk Road, helping to carry its teachings deep into Central Asia, China, and eventually Southeast Asia. As Buddhism spread, so too did its artistic and philosophical influence. Nowhere was this fusion of cultures more vividly displayed than in the Buddhist sculptures and architecture that emerged along the Silk Road. The monumental Bamiyan Buddhas of Afghanistan, towering figures carved into the cliffs, stood as powerful symbols of cultural synthesis, where Greek, Persian, Indian, and Central Asian artistic traditions converged. This distinctive style, known as Greco-Buddhist art, became a testament to the deep interconnection of civilizations linked by these trade routes. More than just a highway for goods, the Silk Road functioned as a vast conduit for ideas, philosophies, and artistic expressions that shaped the identities of the societies it touched. The Silk Road carried silk and spices, but its most profound legacy lay in the exchange of knowledge, beliefs, and cultural traditions. Among the most influential of these was Buddhism, which had already begun its journey centuries earlier under Ashoka the Great. He actively promoted Buddhism beyond India, sending missionaries into Central Asia, China, and Southeast Asia, laying the foundation for its expansion long before the Kushan era. By the 2nd century CE, Buddhism had firmly taken root in China, and by the 4th century, it reached Korea and Japan. This expansion profoundly shaped art, philosophy, and architecture, leaving behind intricate sculptures, vibrant cave paintings, and magnificent temples that still stand as echoes of this cultural transformation. As Buddhism traveled, its artistic expressions evolved to reflect local traditions. In the region of Gandhara, a unique fusion of Greek and Indian sculptural techniques gave rise to a distinct Buddhist artistic style. where Buddha was often depicted in Hellenistic robes with finely chiseled facial features. Further east, Central Asian artisans, particularly the Sogdians, blended Buddhist iconography with their own artistic conventions, producing murals and relief carvings rich in local symbolism. These regional adaptations demonstrate how Buddhism was not only a religion, but also a cultural force that absorbed and reshaped artistic traditions across different civilizations. While Buddhism flourished along the overland Silk Road, another transformation reshaped global commerce, the rise of the maritime Silk Road. As merchants sought alternatives to the arduous desert crossings and perilous mountain passes, maritime trade routes extended the Silk Road's reach beyond land. By the 1st century CE, these sea routes linked India, the Arabian Peninsula, and East Africa with China, Southeast Asia, and even the Roman Empire. Indian ports such as Paruk, Muziris, and Tamralipti became bustling centers of commerce, facilitating the exchange of silk, porcelain, spices, and gemstones. Arabian merchants, well-versed in Red Sea and Persian Gulf navigation, played a pivotal role in transporting goods, while traders from the Malay archipelago ensured the smooth transfer of commodities between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. Beyond material trade, these maritime networks carried technologies, religious beliefs, and cultural practices, further intertwining civilizations across vast distances. The expansion of these routes, driven by the Kushan Empire's influence, the spread of Buddhism, and the growing reliance on maritime trade, marked a turning point in world history. Commerce no longer depended on a single overland passage, but became a vast network of interconnected pathways binding distant civilizations. These routes carried ideas, innovations, and beliefs across continents, shaping cultures and economies for centuries. These connections reached their zenith during the golden age of the Silk Road. As trade routes solidified and civilizations flourished, powerful empires stood at the heart of this expanding world. At the forefront were the Tang Dynasty, the Byzantine Empire, and the Islamic Caliphates, each playing a pivotal role in shaping the cultural and economic exchanges that defined this era of unprecedented global interaction. The Golden Age. Chang'an, the heart of the Tang Dynasty, stood as the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, a city where cultures, religions, and ideas from the farthest corners of the known world converged. It was the most cosmopolitan metropolis of its time, with a population exceeding 1 million, making it not only the political and economic hub of the Tang Empire, but also the epicenter of global trade and cultural exchange. The streets of Chang'an bustled with merchants from Persia, India, Central Asia, and even Europe, each bringing their own languages, customs, and traditions. The grand avenues lined with towering gates and majestic palaces pulsed with the vibrant energy of foreign traders, Buddhist monks, Arab astronomers, and Persian musicians, all shaping the city's dynamic character. Every day, caravans from distant lands converged at the city's sprawling markets, where merchants haggled over contracts, exchanged foreign currencies, and forged alliances that influenced the global economy. Silk, spices, and porcelain were not just commodities. They symbolized power, wealth, and status, passing through the hands of emperors, merchants, and nomads alike. But beyond material wealth, the Silk Road fostered an exchange of revolutionary ideas, technologies, and artistic influences that reshaped civilizations for centuries to come. Chang'an was a true melting pot of civilizations. Persian musicians, Indian monks, Arab merchants, and European traders all left their mark on the city's cultural landscape. The Tang emperors welcomed foreign influences with open arms, encouraging knowledge sharing and embracing artistic innovations from beyond their borders. The city became a center for scholarly pursuits, attracting intellectuals from all over the world. Persian scholars introduced advanced metalworking techniques, Indian mathematicians shared their numerical systems, and Arab traders brought astronomical instruments and scientific manuscripts. This intellectual cross-pollination enriched the Tang court, fostering an age of unprecedented learning and innovation. The impact of these exchanges was profound, influencing everything from music and art to science and philosophy, leaving an enduring legacy that rippled across centuries. Among the most profound cultural influences in Chang'an was the presence of Persian musicians. Hailing from Sogdiana, Parthia, and Persia, these musicians were frequent guests at the imperial court, where they introduced their intricate melodies and complex rhythms to an audience eager for new artistic expressions. Persian music deeply influenced the evolution of Chinese court music, leading to the incorporation of new instruments such as the tar, a Persian lute, which later evolved into the Chinese pipa. Wind instruments and unique tonal scales from Persia also found their way into Tang compositions, blending seamlessly with traditional Chinese musical forms and creating a distinct fusion of East and West. The imperial court was particularly fond of these foreign sounds, and Persian musicians became highly respected figures within the royal palace, their influence extending beyond music into the realms of dance, theater, and poetry. Persian artisans, known for their expertise in metalwork and carpet weaving, also contributed to the cultural fabric of the city, introducing intricate techniques that Chinese craftsmen later adopted. But music and art were not the only aspects of Persian influence in Chang'an. The city's markets were flooded with Persian luxury goods, including finely woven carpets, exquisite jewelry, and richly embroidered textiles. The elaborate designs and motifs of Persian artisans began to appear in Tang-era Chinese clothing and decorative arts, reflecting the deep admiration for Persian craftsmanship. The architectural landscape of Chang'an, too, bore the marks of Persian aesthetics, with gardens modeled after those in the Persian tradition, featuring elaborate fountains, lush greenery, and carefully designed pavilions meant to capture the essence of paradise. While Persian culture left a lasting imprint on Chang'an, the influence of Indian monks was equally profound. Buddhism, which had entered China centuries earlier through the Silk Road, reached its peak during the Tang dynasty, and Chang'an became the religious epicenter of Buddhist learning. Monks from India, having braved treacherous mountain passes and vast deserts, arrived in the city with sacred texts in hand, eager to share their wisdom. At the same time, a Chinese monk named Xuanzang embarked on a legendary journey in the opposite direction, traveling westward to India in search of authentic Buddhist scriptures. After years of studying in the great monasteries of Nalanda and other Indian centers of learning, he returned to Chang'an in 645 CE, bringing with him over 600 Sanskrit texts, as well as first-hand knowledge of Indian Buddhist philosophy. His translations of these scriptures into Chinese played a crucial role in shaping the religious and philosophical landscape of China and the broader East Asian world. The presence of Indian monks in Chang'an was reflected in the city's architecture and religious institutions. Buddhist temples and monasteries modeled after the grand stupas and viharas of India dotted the city, their walls adorned with intricate carvings and paintings depicting the life of the Buddha. These places of worship were not only spiritual sanctuaries, but also centers of scholarly exchange where Indian and Chinese monks engaged in deep discussions about Buddhist doctrine, meditation techniques, and the nature of enlightenment. But Indian monks were not the only foreign visitors shaping Chang'an. The city's bustling markets and scholarly institutions were also home to Arab merchants, whose arrivals signified yet another powerful force in this era of exchange. With the rise of the Islamic caliphates, a new wave of intellectual and commercial connections was established, bringing innovations in trade, mathematics, and astronomy that further transformed Chang'an's cultural landscape. Pilgrims from Japan and Korea also flocked to Chang'an, drawn by its reputation as the greatest center of Buddhist learning in the world. Meanwhile, Arab merchants formed another essential part of Chang'an's bustling commercial life. With the rise of the Islamic caliphates, trade between China and the Arab world flourished, creating a powerful economic and intellectual bridge between East and West. Arab traders brought with them advanced mathematical concepts, knowledge of astronomy, and innovative trade practices that influenced Chinese commerce. The Abbasid Caliphate, with its House of Wisdom in Baghdad, became a key partner in this exchange, translating Greek, Indian, and Persian texts that eventually made their way into China. Arab merchants also introduced new goods to the Tang markets: fragrant spices, intricately woven textiles, and glassware of unparalleled craftsmanship. Their influence extended to cuisine, with Chang'an's dining culture adopting elements of Middle Eastern flavors. from the use of exotic spices to new methods of bread making. The interaction between the Tang Empire and the Islamic world was not limited to trade alone. Diplomatic missions were frequently exchanged, further solidifying the connection between these two great civilizations. Yet, the connections of the Silk Road did not end with the Arab world. Even distant lands such as the Byzantine Empire played a role in this vast network. Though their presence in Chang'an was more subtle, Byzantine traders brought with them goods, gold, and knowledge from the remnants of the Greco-Roman world, further enriching the already diverse tapestry of the Silk Road. Yet, while Persian and Indian influences were deeply woven into the cultural fabric of Chang'an, the presence of European merchants also played a role in shaping the city's cosmopolitan identity. Although the Roman Empire had long since fallen, the Byzantine Empire maintained its trade connections with the East, and merchants from the Mediterranean world continued to travel the Silk Road. These traders brought with them glassware, wine, precious fabrics, and finely crafted jewelry, all highly valued by the Chinese elite. Roman coins, still in circulation, were prized in Chang'an as symbols of prestige and international connections, serving as tangible reminders of a world linked by trade. This connection to Rome, though indirect, further underscored the city's cosmopolitan identity. Diplomatically, Chang'an was the nerve center of the Tang Empire's foreign relations. The emperors used the city's influence to forge alliances with neighboring kingdoms, while also maintaining careful diplomatic ties with nomadic tribes to the north. Embassies from Japan, Korea, and Vietnam regularly visited the imperial court, offering tribute and seeking trade agreements. The Silk Road was more than a mere route for merchants. It was a vital tool of diplomacy, a bridge that connected the Tang dynasty to the rest of the world in ways that transcended commerce. Through its grand palaces and bustling markets, its sacred monasteries and vibrant cultural exchanges, Chang'an stood as a testament to the power of interconnected civilizations. It was a city where Persian melodies drifted through the imperial halls, where Indian monks debated philosophy in candlelit monasteries, where Arab merchants brokered deals beneath golden domes, and where European traders marveled at the vast riches of the East. It was not just the capital of an empire, it was the beating heart of a golden age, where the Silk Road came alive in an unbroken symphony of trade, diplomacy, and cultural transformation. The grandeur of Chang'an was not only built upon material trade, but on the vast intellectual exchanges that flourished along the Silk Road. Among the many civilizations that engaged with the city, the Byzantine Empire played a unique role in this cultural confluence. Though the Byzantines never fully integrated into Chinese society, their influence permeated its vibrant markets and scholarly circles. Byzantine merchants arrived not just with coveted goods, luxurious textiles, glassware, and gold, but with the immense knowledge of their civilization. The empire, a repository of Greek science, medicine, and philosophy, became an unexpected contributor to Chang'an's rich intellectual landscape. Scrolls of ancient Greek medical texts found their way into China, intertwining with indigenous practices. Philosophical ideas shaped by the legacy of Aristotle and Plato subtly influenced discourse among scholars eager to absorb foreign wisdom. These intellectual exchanges reinforced Chang'an's status as a global hub, where trade routes became pathways of knowledge, enriching not only its economy, but its very cultural and artistic soul. Beyond the markets and scholarly halls, the Silk Road wove an invisible thread that connected artistic traditions across vast distances, creating an unprecedented exchange of aesthetic influences. From the grandeur of Rome to the intricate artistry of Persia, from the sacred temples of India to the serene landscapes of China, this web of cultural transmission gave birth to a fusion of Eastern and Western artistic styles. As merchants, pilgrims, and travelers journeyed across these lands, they carried not only goods but creative techniques, evolving artistic expressions into something truly borderless. Cities such as Chang'an, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar became thriving melting pots where cultures merged, giving rise to breathtaking works of art that reflected the spirit of global connectivity. Nowhere was this artistic synthesis more profound than in the evolution of Buddhist art in China? Buddhism, carried along the Silk Road by monks and devotees, brought with it a visual language of spiritual devotion that transformed China's artistic landscape. The breathtaking Buddhist cave temples that emerged along these ancient routes stand as eternal monuments to this convergence of faith and creativity. The most magnificent among them, the Dunhuang Caves, nestled in the rugged cliffs along the Hexi corridor, hold within their walls the very essence of this cultural fusion. These sacred sanctuaries, carved into the rock and adorned with luminous murals and sculptures, became living testaments to centuries of artistic evolution. Within these hallowed spaces, celestial beings hover in delicate brushstrokes, bodhisattvas gaze with serene wisdom, and the stories of the Buddha unfold in vivid colors. Travelers from distant lands, clad in silken robes, are depicted in the murals, capturing the multicultural vibrancy of the Silk Road's travelers. Among these treasures, the Mogao Caves stand as an unparalleled marvel, where Indian Buddhist artistic traditions merged seamlessly with Chinese aesthetics. Established as early as the 4th century CE, these cave temples became not only places of worship, but centers of knowledge where ideas, styles, and spiritual beliefs interwove into a harmonious artistic legacy. But the influence of the Silk Road extended far beyond Buddhism. Persian and Central Asian artistic elements subtly reshaped Chinese art, introducing new motifs, patterns, and techniques that left an indelible mark on the empire's visual culture. The Sogdians, expert traders and cultural conduits, carried Persian artistic traditions deep into the heart of China, leaving traces of their influence in Chinese textiles, ceramics, and sculpture. Delicate, Persian-style floral patterns and Iranian ceramic designs began to grace Chinese porcelain, reflecting a growing artistic dialogue between East and West. The elaborate craftsmanship of Persian metalwork, enriched by Greco-Roman and Indian traditions, captivated Chinese artisans, inspiring them to experiment with new decorative techniques. Among the most prized goods along the Silk Road were the opulent textiles of the Sassanid Persian Empire, whose luxurious silk fabrics found favor in Chinese courts. These textiles, adorned with intricate mythological creatures, floral motifs, and geometric patterns, seamlessly blended with Chinese artistic sensibilities, further blurring the boundaries between cultures. In the grand weaving houses of China, artisans incorporated these foreign influences into their own traditions, creating fabrics that carried whispers of distant lands. The architectural legacy of the Silk Road stood as another profound testament to the cultural exchanges that shaped the urban landscapes of cities across Asia and beyond. As Buddhism spread, so too did its sacred architecture, absorbing elements from India, Persia, Greece, and China, leaving an enduring imprint on the cities that flourished along the trade routes. Nowhere was this synthesis more evident than in the dazzling Tang Dynasty capital of Chang'an, a city that stood as a beacon of cosmopolitan grandeur. At the heart of this vast empire, Chang'an was more than just a political capital. It was a meticulously designed masterpiece, reflecting both the imperial authority of the Tang rulers and the city's openness to foreign influences. Deeply rooted in Chinese principles of feng shui, its urban layout also bore the marks of Persian and Central Asian architectural styles, creating a unique fusion that set it apart from any other city of its time. Towering walls enclosed a metropolis of grand avenues, bustling markets, sprawling palaces, and majestic temples, where merchants, scholars, and travelers from across the Silk Road gathered in a whirlwind of cultural exchange. Within this magnificent city, the Daming Palace stood as the crowning jewel of Tang architecture, a structure of unparalleled splendor. Its vast courtyards, lush gardens, and intricate interiors bore traces of Persian influence, evoking the grandeur of the palatial estates of the Sassanid kings. Inside, Byzantine-inspired decorative elements adorned the walls, reminiscent of the opulent mosaics found in the imperial halls of Constantinople. Every stone, every archway, every pavilion of Chang'an whispered the story of civilizations converging, shaping an architectural wonder that transcended borders. Beyond Chang'an's imperial splendor, the Silk Road transformed Buddhist temples and monasteries into breathtaking expressions of cultural fusion. As Buddhism traveled eastward, its sacred structures evolved, adapting to the artistic traditions of the lands they touched. Indian stupas, originally designed to house relics of the Buddha, were reimagined in China as soaring pagodas, tall, multi-tiered towers that became iconic symbols of Buddhist devotion. The Mogao Caves in Dunhuang and the Longmen Grottos in Luoyang stand as eternal reminders of this artistic evolution. Their cavernous walls adorned with intricate carvings and celestial murals that seamlessly blend Indian, Central Asian, and Chinese influences. In these sacred spaces, history and spirituality intertwined, echoing the voices of countless travelers who journeyed along the Silk Road in search of enlightenment and artistic inspiration. Yet, the Silk Road was more than a bridge between cultures and religions. It was a battleground of ambition, where the pursuit of wealth and power knew no borders. Empires fought for control over its riches, and none more so than the Byzantine Empire, which set its sights on one of the Silk Road's most coveted treasures. What unfolded was no mere trade dispute, but a tale of espionage, deception, and high-stakes smuggling, one that shifted the balance of power forever. Among the grand cultural exchanges of the Silk Road, one of its most dramatic stories was not written in the bustling markets of Chang'an or the silent temples of Dunhuang, but in the shadowed corridors of espionage. It was a tale of secrecy and deception, the moment when the Byzantine Empire sought to break China's monopoly on silk. By the 6th century, silk had become more than a luxury in Byzantium. It was a currency of power, a fabric so prized that its production was guarded with unwavering secrecy. For Emperor Justinian I, this dependence on Chinese silk was an unacceptable vulnerability, one that could only be overcome through a daring act of subterfuge. What followed was a mission that began not on the Silk Road, but in the heart of Constantinople, where Justinian I devised his empire's most ambitious act of deception, the silk smuggling incident. In the grand halls of his palace, torchlight flickered against gilded walls as Emperor Justinian I weighed his options. Silk, the most coveted fabric in the known world, remained beyond his empire's grasp. As long as Byzantium depended on foreign merchants for its supply, true dominance over trade would never be his. He needed a solution, one that required not diplomacy, but deception. In the early 6th century, Justinian sent missionaries and diplomats eastward, hoping to negotiate access to silk production. Every attempt ended in failure. The Chinese court, well aware of silk's immense value, refused to share its secrets. With diplomacy yielding no results, the emperor turned to a more covert strategy. Determined to succeed, he summoned 2 monks, Scholasticus and Cosmas, men who had spent years traveling the Silk Road, gaining knowledge of distant lands and their customs. They were neither warriors nor traditional spies, but they were masters of discretion. Their mission was simple yet perilous: infiltrate China, uncover the secrets of silk production, and smuggle back the means to create it within the empire. Disguised as humble travelers, the monks embarked on their perilous journey, crossing treacherous mountain passes, endless deserts, and the vast expanse of foreign lands. They moved cautiously, slipping through bustling marketplaces where traders bartered for exotic goods. Every step brought them closer to the heart of China's silk industry, where they faced the greatest challenge of all, stealing a secret that had remained unbroken for centuries. Upon reaching their destination, they watched master weavers at work, their hands skillfully spinning fine silk threads, transforming them into garments fit for royalty. Yet it was not just the weaving that fascinated them, it was the silkworms. Tiny creatures carefully nurtured and fed mulberry leaves were the true source of the empire's greatest treasure. The monks realized that without these silkworms, no amount of knowledge would be enough. They had to find a way to smuggle them back to Constantinople without arousing suspicion. The task was nearly impossible. Chinese law strictly forbade the export of silkworms, and anyone caught attempting to smuggle them out faced severe punishment. But the monks were undeterred. Using their ingenuity, They carefully concealed silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds within the hollowed-out compartments of their walking sticks. It was a gamble, one that, if discovered, would cost them their lives. With their precious cargo secured, they began the long and arduous journey home, retracing their steps through the Silk Road's perilous paths. When the monks arrived in Constantinople, they were greeted not as mere travelers, but as heroes. They presented their findings to Justinian, revealing the intricate techniques of silk production and the very creatures that made it possible. The emperor wasted no time. He ordered the establishment of imperial silk workshops, where skilled artisans trained in the craft. With patience and careful cultivation, the first silkworms of the West began producing the threads that transformed Byzantine history. Silk, once an elusive treasure imported at great cost, was now woven within the walls of Constantinople itself. The Byzantine silk industry flourished, supplying the imperial court with garments of unmatched elegance. Gold-threaded robes adorned the emperor, shimmering tapestries decorated grand palaces, and silk-draped altars within churches became a symbol of divine opulence. But it was not just for the elite. The empire soon began exporting silk, establishing itself as a dominant force in global trade. Byzantine silk became highly sought after, reaching the courts of Europe and the bustling markets of the Islamic world. Yet this newfound success came at a cost. Rising Islamic caliphates developed their own silk industries, setting the stage for a new era of economic rivalry. Silk production techniques spread through the Mediterranean, Persia, and North Africa, fueling both competition and cultural exchange. The Byzantines had broken China's monopoly, but they also ignited a race that shaped the Silk Road's legacy for centuries. The silk smuggling incident under Justinian's reign remains one of the boldest acts of industrial espionage in history. What began as a desperate mission by two monks had reshaped the balance of power in the ancient world. Through secrecy, strategy, and sheer determination, the Byzantine Empire had seized control of one of the world's most valuable commodities. And in doing so, it reinforced a truth that had long defined the Silk Road. Not only was it a highway of trade, but a battleground of ambition where knowledge and deception were as valuable as gold. With silk now flowing from within its own borders, Byzantium had secured a powerful foothold in the lucrative trade networks spanning the Mediterranean, Europe, and the Near East. No longer shackled by dependence on foreign merchants, the empire emerged as a dominant force in the global silk market. Lavish Byzantine textiles, woven with gold and embroidered with intricate patterns, became the envy of courts far and wide. Yet, in the ever-shifting world of trade, no monopoly lasted unchallenged. To the east, a new empire was rising. The Abbasid Caliphate, which ascended to power in 750 CE, was not merely a political dynasty, it was a commercial titan. From its magnificent capital of Baghdad, the Abbasids presided over a realm stretching from the Indian subcontinent to North Africa. Their dominion encompassed some of the most vital arteries of global commerce, linking China's silk-producing heartlands with the opulent markets of the Mediterranean. And in this vast network of trade, silk remained one of the most prized commodities. Baghdad, standing at the crossroads of civilizations, became the beating heart of the Abbasid economy. Its sprawling bazaars teemed with merchants from every corner of the known world. Indian traders arrived with bundles of fine cotton and exotic spices. Chinese envoys brought porcelain, lacquerware, and the softest silks, carefully packed in chests lined with perfumed wood. From the Byzantine Empire came glassware, finely crafted jewelry, and textiles of dazzling complexity. Here, beneath the towering domes of the city, East and West collided in a symphony of commerce as goods, ideas, and ambitions intertwined. But the Abbasids were not merely traders, they were visionaries. The House of Wisdom, a renowned center of learning, stood at the forefront of intellectual exchange, where scholars translated ancient Greek, Indian, and Persian texts, preserving and refining the knowledge of past civilizations. Astronomers charted the heavens, mathematicians expanded the frontiers of numbers, and geographers mapped the vast world beyond their borders. These advancements, fueled by the constant movement of merchants and travelers along the Silk Road, did more than just enrich the Abbasid Caliphate, They shaped the very fabric of history. As the empire flourished, its influence extended far beyond commerce. The Abbasids became custodians of knowledge, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancient world was not lost to time. Books and ideas from Baghdad's libraries spread into the heart of Europe, igniting the flames of the Renaissance. This intellectual dominance mirrored the Abbasids' growing control over the Silk Road, intertwining the flow of ideas with trade. With knowledge and goods passing through its gates, Baghdad reshaped the world's intellectual landscape and redefined the balance of power along the Silk Road. Trade was never just about goods. It was about influence, power, and the legacy left behind. As the Abbasids cemented their position as the new masters of commerce, their intellectual pursuits became just as crucial. At the heart of this scholarly revolution stood the House of Wisdom, established in the early 9th century by Caliph al-Ma'mun. This extraordinary institution was more than a library. It was a crucible of innovation, where scholars from diverse backgrounds gathered to study, translate, and expand upon the works of ancient civilizations. They undertook the monumental task of preserving classical knowledge from Greek, Persian, and Indian sources while making groundbreaking contributions in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and geography. The House of Wisdom became home to some of history's most brilliant minds: Al-Khwarizmi, Al-Razi, Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Al-Farabi, to name a few. Their meticulous efforts preserved and transmitted the intellectual achievements of ancient Greece, Rome, and Persia, playing a crucial role in fueling the European Renaissance centuries later. But the House of Wisdom was more than just a center for preservation. It was a driving force of innovation. Al-Khwarizmi revolutionized mathematics by developing algebra, an achievement that shaped the discipline for centuries. Avicenna made profound advancements in medicine, compiling the Canon of Medicine, which became the authoritative medical reference in both the Islamic world and Europe for generations. Scholars in Baghdad explored optics, chemistry, and astronomy, expanding humanity's understanding of optical lenses, chemical reactions, and celestial mapping. The knowledge cultivated here was not confined to books. It drove the practical advancements of the medieval world. Beyond academic pursuits, the House of Wisdom was a thriving hub of cultural exchange, drawing scholars from the Islamic world, India, and China. It was a place where ideas converged, fostering a cosmopolitan spirit that made Baghdad one of the most vibrant cities of its time. The Silk Road played a crucial role in this intellectual flourishing, as Arab merchants, Persian scholars, and Indian traders carried insights about medicinal herbs, mathematical theories, and astronomical observations along its vast routes. This symbiotic relationship between scholarship and trade underscored the significance of the House of Wisdom, not just as an academic sanctuary, but as a powerhouse of intellectual progress. Through the efforts of Abbasid scholars, the Islamic Caliphate became a key player in the transmission of knowledge, linking the past to the future and shaping the intellectual currents that would later define the modern world. While the House of Wisdom illuminated the path of knowledge, the Abbasid Caliphate extended its influence beyond scholarship, establishing expansive trade networks that connected the Islamic world with distant civilizations. These vast commercial ties were not limited to economic transactions. They facilitated cultural and intellectual exchanges that shaped medieval societies. Among the most significant trade relationships of the Abbasid era were those with the Viking Rus, North Africa, and Spain, each serving as a vital link in a global network of commerce and ideas. The Viking Rus, Norse traders and warriors who settled along the rivers of Eastern Europe, played a pivotal role in connecting the Islamic caliphates to Scandinavia and the Baltic. As expert navigators, the Vikings used their longships to traverse both seas and rivers, acting as intermediaries between Northern Europe and the Islamic world. They transported furs, amber, slaves, and timber from the north, exchanging them for silver, gold, luxurious textiles, spices, and glassware highly prized in their homelands. The Rus-Byzantine trade route became a crucial artery of commerce, eventually merging with Arab trade networks. So significant was this relationship that Islamic merchants in Baghdad recognized the Vikings' strategic importance, and Islamic coins found widespread circulation in Viking settlements. Encounters between these two civilizations were documented by figures such as Ibn Fadlan, whose writings provide a rare glimpse into the customs and trade practices of the Viking Rus. To the south, North Africa emerged as a linchpin of the Islamic world's vast trade system. The Maghreb region, situated at the crossroads of the Mediterranean and the Sahara, became a vital connector between sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Merchants from North Africa supplied the Islamic caliphates with essential commodities: salt, gold, ivory, palm oil, and slaves, transported across the Sahara by expansive caravans and through thriving port cities. Carthage flourished as a bustling commercial center, while Cairo evolved into a dynamic meeting ground for traders from Asia, Africa, and Europe. The Fatimid Caliphate, which controlled Egypt and the Maghreb, further strengthened these trade networks, ensuring the seamless flow of goods and ideas. To the west, Al-Andalus, the Muslim-ruled region of Spain, became a beacon of trade, culture, and intellectual achievement. Under the Umayyad Caliphate of Córdoba, established in 711 CE, Spain flourished as an economic and scholarly powerhouse, serving as a bridge between the Islamic and European worlds. Córdoba, one of the most advanced cities of its time, attracted merchants who engaged in the trade of silk, spices, precious metals, glass, ceramics, and exquisite textiles from Africa and the Middle East. In return, Al-Andalus exported olive oil, wine, wheat, and textiles, which found their way into markets across North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Yet trade with Spain was about more than material goods. It also facilitated the flow of knowledge. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad directly influenced the intellectual climate of Al-Andalus, where scholars made groundbreaking contributions in astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. The translation of Greek texts into Arabic and subsequently into Latin ensured that the scientific and philosophical advancements of the Islamic Golden Age reached Europe, laying the intellectual groundwork for the Renaissance. This exchange extended beyond academia. It left lasting imprints on architecture, craftsmanship, and artistry. The Great Mosque of Córdoba, with its blend of Islamic, Roman, and Visigothic influences, stood as a testament to cultural fusion, while trade routes introduced artistic techniques that transformed Spanish metalworking, textiles, and glass production. These expansive trade networks, stretching from the Viking world to the Mediterranean and beyond, exemplified the interconnected nature of the medieval world. The Islamic caliphates, with their strategic control of these trade routes, not only enriched their own economies, but also played a defining role in shaping global commerce and cultural exchange. Goods, people, and ideas moved freely between distant regions, weaving together a complex web of influence that spanned continents. But the significance of these exchanges went far beyond commerce. Trade between the Islamic caliphates, the Viking Rus, North Africa, and Spain fostered profound cultural interactions that shaped entire civilizations. Through the translation efforts of scholars in Córdoba and Baghdad, mathematical theories, medical advancements, and philosophical ideas spread into Europe, leaving an indelible mark on Western intellectual traditions. Innovations in agriculture, introduced through these exchanges, revolutionized farming techniques, as irrigation systems and new crops reshaped landscapes across different regions. The fusion of artistic styles, religious beliefs, and architectural influences further enriched societies on both sides of the trade routes. The economic prosperity generated by these networks was paralleled by an intellectual and cultural legacy that endured for centuries. These connections were not merely about wealth, they were about the transmission of knowledge, the sharing of artistic and technological achievements, and the blending of traditions that defined the medieval world. Through their role as facilitators of trade, scholarship, and innovation, the Islamic caliphates left an enduring impact on global history, laying the foundation for the transformative revolutions that shaped the centuries that followed. While the Islamic caliphates played a crucial role in shaping medieval trade and cultural exchange, the vast web of trade routes they controlled remained fragmented, vulnerable to local conflicts, tolls, and banditry. Merchants faced constant risks, and no single power could ensure the free and safe movement of goods across continents. But in the 13th century, a new force emerged from the steppes of Central Asia. The Mongols, forging the largest contiguous empire in history, did not merely reshape political boundaries, they They revolutionized the Silk Road itself. Pax Mongolica. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, was more than just an era of stability. It was a time when the world seemed to shrink as the vast Mongol Empire stretched from China to Eastern Europe. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Central Asia, and glasswork from Venice could all travel safely across thousands of miles, carried by merchants who no longer feared the perils of the open road. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, the Silk Road flourished like never before, bustling with activity as traders, scholars, and adventurers moved freely, carrying not only goods but also ideas. But to understand how this golden age of trade began, we must go back to the early years of Genghis Khan, then known as Temujin. Born into a world of warring tribes, he was a man of ambition, resilience, and an unyielding vision of unity. Through sheer determination and unmatched military strategy, he brought together the fragmented Mongol clans, forging them into a single unstoppable force. His warriors rode with the speed of the wind, striking with precision and power, dismantling empires that had stood for centuries. Yet, conquest was never the sole objective. Genghis Khan understood that true power came not just from the sword, but from the prosperity of trade. If he could control the Silk Road, he could control the heartbeat of global commerce. To secure these trade routes, he turned his armies toward the powerful kingdoms that stood in his way: the Karakhanid Khanate, the Khwarezmian Empire, and the Western Xia and Jin dynasties. These states had long dominated the trade corridors, acting as gatekeepers to the riches of the East and West. But they were no match for the Mongols' fearsome cavalry, whose lightning-fast attacks and psychological warfare crushed even the strongest defenses. The fall of the Khwarezmian Empire was particularly brutal. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, once centers of learning and commerce, fell under Mongol rule. And yet, the Mongols did not simply plunder and move on. Their rule was built on a pragmatic approach to administration, one that ensured trade did not just survive, but thrived like never before. The Mongols were not just conquerors, they were master administrators. Knowing that trade was the key to their empire's prosperity, they implemented strict laws to protect merchants, stationed patrols along the Silk Road, and established military outposts to serve as havens for weary travelers. A merchant setting out from China with a caravan of silk could now journey all the way to Persia without fearing for his life. Road networks expanded, bridges were repaired, and a sophisticated taxation system was introduced, one that encouraged trade rather than stifling it. The Mongols even granted tax exemptions to merchants, recognizing their vital role in the empire's economy. For the first time, an interconnected world was not just a vision, but a reality. But military strength alone did not keep this vast network intact. The Mongols understood that diplomacy was just as powerful as the sword. They established formal relations with Persia, the Byzantine Empire, and European kingdoms, ensuring that envoys, traders, and scholars moved freely without political interference. Genghis Khan personally sent ambassadors to distant lands, securing trade agreements that reinforced his empire's dominance. In some cases, marriage alliances between Mongol rulers and foreign nobility strengthened ties, maintaining peace and allowing commerce to flourish. Of course, trade and diplomacy could not function without a highly efficient system of communication. Spanning an empire from China to Europe required more than just military might. It demanded a logistical network capable of relaying messages swiftly across thousands of miles. Recognizing this, the Mongols established one of the most sophisticated relay networks in history, the Yam system. This was no ordinary postal system. It was the lifeline of governance, trade, and military strategy, a mechanism that allowed the Mongols to rule over the largest contiguous empire in history with remarkable control and precision. From the windswept steppes of Mongolia to the bustling cities of China, the rugged mountains of Persia, and the distant reaches of Eastern Europe, the Yam stretched across thousands of miles, creating a seamless flow of information and goods. Genghis Khan, a visionary not only in conquest but in administration, understood that a fragmented empire was a vulnerable one. Without swift communication, control over such a vast expanse would be impossible. To solve this, he devised a relay system where mounted couriers, known as yamchi, would ride tirelessly between relay stations, carrying messages, military commands, and even trade goods with unparalleled speed. Relay stations, called yam posts, were placed at intervals of 25 to 40 miles along major trade routes, ensuring that couriers never rode an exhausted horse for too long. At each station, fresh horses awaited, allowing riders to switch mounts and continue their journey without delay. The system was so efficient that couriers could cover nearly 100 miles in a single day, an astonishing feat in the medieval world. But the yam system was more than just a tool for governance, it became the backbone of commerce. A trader carrying silks from China could send word ahead to arrange safe passage, while scholars could exchange knowledge across continents in weeks rather than years. Each yam post was not just a place for exchanging horses, it was a fully equipped station, offering food, lodging, and protection for couriers and travelers alike. These riders, hand-picked for their stamina and reliability, carried with them the weight of the empire's governance, ensuring that no corner of Mongol rule remained isolated for long. Through war and wisdom, the Mongols created an empire unlike any before. The Silk Road was no longer a dangerous, unpredictable route used only by the bravest merchants. It became a lifeline, connecting civilizations, a highway of wealth, knowledge, and ambition. In this golden era of trade, the world changed forever as cultures intertwined, technologies advanced, and ideas spread, shaping us the course of history for centuries to come. But the significance of the yam extended far beyond military orders and imperial decrees. It revolutionized the Silk Road itself. For centuries, the ancient trade routes that connected east and west had been plagued by the constant threat of bandits, warlords, and political instability. Merchants traveling through the vast deserts and treacherous mountain passes lived in perpetual fear of losing their fortunes to raiders. The Mongols, despite their fearsome reputation in battle, were pragmatic rulers who understood the value of commerce. They actively protected merchants, offering them paisa, a special metal tablet that granted them passage and privileges within Mongol lands. Those who carried the paisa had the right to access the yam network using its relay stations for shelter and supplies. This level of security was unprecedented, and under Mongol rule, the Silk Road experienced a golden age of prosperity. With the yam system in place, goods flowed faster than ever before. Silk, porcelain, spices, paper, and precious gems moved effortlessly between China, Central Asia, Persia, and Europe. The Mongols, known for their ability to adapt and integrate the best aspects of the cultures they conquered, facilitated a level of global trade that had never been seen before. The interconnectedness of the empire allowed merchants to plan their journeys with greater confidence, knowing that they had a well-established support system to rely on. The routes became more structured, trade agreements became more predictable, and the exchange of commodities became more efficient. Yet, the yam system carried more than just material wealth. It became a conduit for the transmission of knowledge and innovation. Ideas moved as swiftly as silk and spices, spreading across the empire at an unprecedented rate. Chinese inventions such as gunpowder, papermaking, and printing traveled westward, changing the course of European history. Islamic scholars exchanged medical knowledge with Chinese physicians, while astronomical advancements from Persia influenced the scientific landscape of both East and West. Even after the Mongol Empire began to fragment, the impact of the yam endured. The model it provided for rapid communication and trade inspired future postal and courier networks across Europe and Asia. The efficiency and organization of the system influenced the development of modern postal services, laying the groundwork for structured communication networks that would define later centuries. Some historians even regard the Mongol yam as a precursor to the modern globalized world, where speed, connectivity, and secure trade routes are fundamental to economic and political stability. The unparalleled efficiency of the Mongol yam system, along with the security and prosperity it brought to the Silk Road, made the East more accessible than ever. This newfound connectivity did not go unnoticed in Europe, where ambitious traders sought to explore these distant lands in search of wealth and opportunity. Among them was a young Venetian named Marco Polo, whose remarkable journey provided the West with one of the most detailed and awe-inspiring accounts of the Mongol world. Marco Polo's journey. Born in Venice in 1254, Marco Polo became one of the most renowned explorers of the Silk Road, bridging the knowledge gap between East and West. His journey to China and his time at the court of Kublai Khan remain among the most fascinating episodes in the history of European exploration and the Mongol Empire. Marco came from a family of merchants who frequently traveled and traded across the Mediterranean and Asia. His father, Niccolo Polo, and his uncle, Maffeo Polo, were Venetian traders who had already ventured deep into the East. Their journey took them through Constantinople, across the Middle East, and into Persia, where they forged valuable trade connections. During their travels, they secured an audience with Kublai Khan, gaining first-hand insight into the vast wealth and power of the Mongol Empire. Upon returning to Venice, they shared incredible tales of the Mongol ruler's grandeur and the immense opportunities for trade, fueling young Marco's fascination with the East. In 1271, at just 17 years old, Marco embarked on an extraordinary journey alongside his father and uncle, determined to reach Kublai Khan's court. Their mission was not only to expand their family's trading ventures, but also to fulfill the Mongol emperor's request. He had previously asked the Polo brothers to return with European scholars, craftsmen, and religious figures. The journey was perilous, covering thousands of miles across some of the world's most inhospitable terrains. They first navigated the bustling trade hubs of Acre and Baghdad before continuing eastward into Persia, following well-established caravan routes. From there, they braved scorching deserts, treacherous mountain passes, and the desolate landscapes of Central Asia, enduring the harsh conditions of the Gobi Desert, where food and water were scarce. After nearly 4 grueling years, the Polo family finally arrived in China in 1275, reaching Kublai Khan's magnificent capital, then known as Dadu, modern-day Beijing. The Mongol emperor, renowned for his curiosity about foreign lands and cultures, welcomed the Venetians with great interest. He was particularly fascinated by Marco, who, despite his youth, displayed remarkable intelligence, adaptability, and linguistic skills. Unlike most European travelers who had only limited access to Mongol lands, Marco was not just a visitor. He became an integral part of Kublai Khan's court. The emperor entrusted him with significant administrative and diplomatic responsibilities, sending him on missions across the empire to oversee tax collection, inspect provincial affairs, and serve as an emissary to distant territories. His fluency in multiple languages and deep understanding of different cultures made him an invaluable figure within the imperial administration. During his 17-year stay in China, Marco marveled at the grandeur of Mongol rule and the thriving cities of the empire. He visited Hangzhou, the former capital of the Southern Song dynasty, which he described as one of the most beautiful and advanced cities in the world. He was astounded by its intricate network of canals, bustling marketplaces, and level of urban sophistication, far surpassing anything he had seen in Europe. Among China's many innovations, Marco encountered remarkable technologies, printing techniques, advanced metallurgy, and the early use of gunpowder. Perhaps most strikingly, he witnessed China's well-developed paper currency system, an economic innovation centuries ahead of its European counterparts. His detailed accounts of the Mongol Empire's wealth, governance, and technological achievements inspired European explorers and reshaped the West's understanding of the East. Beyond its economic and technological advancements, Marco also experienced the vast cultural and religious diversity of the Mongol Empire. He noted the coexistence of various faiths, including Buddhism, Islam, and Nestorian Christianity, and observed the religious tolerance promoted by Kublai Khan, who allowed different religious communities to flourish under his rule. The Mongol court was a melting pot of cultures, with advisors and officials from Persia, Central Asia, and beyond. He was captivated by the splendor of the great Khan's palace, vast halls adorned with gold, silk, and precious stones. Lavish feasts entertained the elite, where exotic foods, music, and performances showcased the empire's cosmopolitan nature. But Marco's travels extended far beyond the imperial capital. He ventured into the mountainous landscapes of Tibet, explored the thriving port cities along China's eastern coast, and witnessed the bustling maritime trade networks that connected China to Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean. After spending nearly 2 decades in the Mongol Empire, Marco Polo and his family finally decided to return to Venice in 1292. Kublai Khan, though reluctant to let them leave, granted them permission and even entrusted them with an important diplomatic mission. The Polos joined a naval expedition to escort a Mongol princess to Persia, a journey that took them across the South China Sea, past the kingdoms of Southeast Asia, and through the perilous waters of the Indian Ocean. The voyage was fraught with challenges, violent storms, disease, and the constant threat of pirate attacks. Many members of the expedition perished along the way. Despite these hardships, the Polos eventually made their way back to Europe, arriving in Venice in 1295. Marco's return to his homeland after so many years in the East was met with skepticism. His tales of the Mongol Empire's wealth and sophistication seemed too extraordinary to be true, and many doubted the authenticity of his stories. However, his life took an unexpected turn when he was captured during a naval battle between Venice and Genoa. While imprisoned, he dictated the account of his travels to a fellow prisoner, Rustichello de Pisa, who compiled the stories into what would become one of the most famous travel books in history, The Travels of Marco Polo. The book provided Europeans with a detailed account of the wonders of Asia, describing its great cities, advanced infrastructure, and vast riches. It became one of the most widely read and influential works of the Middle Ages, sparking an intense fascination with the East. Marco Polo's writings played a crucial role in shaping European perceptions of Asia. His descriptions of China's wealth, spices, silk, and precious gems captivated the imaginations of merchants, explorers, and rulers alike. His book served as one of the primary sources of knowledge about the East for centuries, inspiring future explorers, most notably Christopher Columbus. Upon reading Marco Polo's descriptions of the riches of the East, Columbus became determined to find a direct sea route to Asia, a goal that ultimately led to his famous voyage across the Atlantic in 1492. The desire to access the lucrative trade networks Marco described played a major role in fueling the Age of Exploration, leading European powers to seek new maritime routes to Asia and beyond. Although some historians have debated the accuracy of certain details in The Travels of Marco Polo, there is no doubt that his journey significantly impacted global history. His first-hand observations provided Europeans with an unprecedented glimpse into the world of the Mongol Empire, helping to bridge the gap between East and West. His legacy as one of the greatest travelers of all time endures, symbolizing the power of exploration, cultural exchange, and the boundless curiosity that drives human discovery. Marco Polo's journey not only expanded Europe's understanding of Asia, but also ignited a deep-seated desire to reach the lands he described. For centuries, his accounts remained one of the most comprehensive sources of knowledge about the East, influencing merchants, scholars, and rulers alike. Among those most profoundly inspired was a young Italian navigator named Christopher Columbus. Captivated by Polo's tales of China's immense wealth and exotic spices, Columbus became determined to find a new route to these fabled lands. Unlike Polo, who traveled eastward overland, Columbus sought a revolutionary approach, sailing westward across the Atlantic. His vision sparked a new era of exploration and reshaped the course of history forever. Christopher Columbus and a new era of globalization. By the late 15th century, Columbus, deeply inspired by Polo's writings, became determined to find a direct maritime route to Asia. At the time, European access to Asia's riches became increasingly difficult, as the overland trade routes were controlled by the Ottoman Empire, making trade with the East both expensive and dangerous. Columbus believed that by sailing west, he could bypass these treacherous routes and establish a direct connection to the East. He studied Polo's accounts, which described the immense wealth of China, the spice markets of India, and the splendor of the Mongol court, and he became convinced that these riches lay within his reach across the sea. Columbus's understanding of geography, however, remained flawed. He underestimated the size of the Earth and lacked knowledge of the American continent lying in his path. Despite this, his determination remained unwavering. After years of rejection from various European courts, Columbus secured the backing of the Spanish monarchy, King Ferdinand, and Queen Isabella, who saw the immense potential for wealth and power in his proposal. They agreed to fund his expedition in 1492, and Columbus set sail on one of the most momentous voyages in history. With 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, he crossed the uncharted waters of the Atlantic. When he landed in the Caribbean, he believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, mistaking the islands he encountered for part of the East Indies. Though he never reached China or India, his voyage marked the beginning of European exploration and colonization of the Americas. His discovery of the New World opened up entirely new trade networks and shifted the global balance of power. Yet, Columbus's original goal had always been to follow in Marco Polo's footsteps, seeking access to the riches of the East. The impact of Polo's writings was not limited to Columbus alone. Many other explorers of the Age of Discovery, including Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan, were also influenced by Polo's vivid accounts of Asia. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, successfully found a sea route to India by sailing around the southern tip of Africa, proving that a maritime path to the east was indeed possible. Ferdinand Magellan, driven by the same desire to reach the spice-rich lands of Asia, led the first expedition to circumnavigate the globe, further expanding European influence across the world. Marco Polo's descriptions of Asia had created a vision of boundless opportunity, inspiring these explorers to push beyond the known world in search of wealth, trade, and new frontiers. The Portuguese and Spanish, leading the charge in European exploration, were motivated by both economic and political ambitions. The lucrative trade in spices, silk, and precious metals was a key driver of their expeditions, and Polo's centuries-old accounts continued to shape their understanding of the world beyond Europe. His ability to navigate diverse cultures, communicate in multiple languages, and serve as a bridge between civilizations set a precedent for future explorers. Many, including Columbus and Magellan, sought to emulate his ability to adapt to new environments, negotiate with foreign rulers, and document their journeys. His meticulous storytelling and detailed documentation of the lands he visited made the travels of Marco Polo one of the most valuable books of its time, fueling Europe's fascination with distant lands. This emphasis on documentation became a defining feature of the Age of Exploration, as explorers sought not only to reach new territories, but also to bring back tales of their adventures. The desire to return from distant lands with stories of exotic peoples, landscapes, and riches became an integral part of the European exploration narrative, with each new voyage adding to the expanding knowledge of the world. As the great overland routes of the Silk Road declined, the age of maritime exploration reshaped global trade and geopolitics. The shift from land-based to sea-based trade routes transformed economies, bringing an era of global interaction on an unprecedented scale. The impact of Polo's writings extended beyond the ambitions of individual explorers. It set in motion a new era of globalization. A world once connected primarily through the Silk Road's overland trade now expanded into oceanic routes. Encounters between civilizations were no longer limited to a few merchants braving desert caravans, but were now driven by fleets of ships crossing vast oceans, carrying not just goods but also ideas, technologies, and beliefs. The geopolitical landscape shifted as European powers established colonies, controlled new trade networks, and influenced distant lands in ways that shaped world history for centuries. Marco Polo's journey and its impact on figures like Columbus cannot be overstated. His accounts painted a vivid picture of a world beyond Europe, filled with wealth and possibilities, igniting the imaginations of those who sought to follow in his footsteps. The curiosity his writings inspired led directly to some of the most transformative expeditions in human history, setting in motion centuries of exploration, conquest, and global trade. Although Polo never intended to shape the course of European exploration, his detailed observations provided the foundation for those who would go on to chart new territories, connect distant civilizations, and usher in an era of unprecedented global exchange. His influence, whether in the ambitions of Columbus or the grander vision of globalization, remains one of the most enduring legacies of the medieval world's encounter with the unknown. Yet, even as the Silk Road flourished, its vast network of interconnected trade routes carried more than just goods and ideas. Hidden within the caravans and merchant ships was an invisible threat, one that would change the course of history. The Black Death, one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, swept across Eurasia between 1347 and 1351, leaving an unimaginable toll on populations and societies. This deadly disease, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, found an unintended but highly effective carrier in the vast network of trade routes known as the Silk Road. For centuries, these routes had been a lifeline of commerce and cultural exchange, connecting the East and the West. But in this period, they became highways of death. The plague is believed to have originated in Central Asia, in the regions of modern-day China and Mongolia, before spreading relentlessly across the Mongol Empire. Ironically, the very success of the Mongols in unifying vast territories under a single rule had inadvertently created the perfect conditions for the rapid movement of people, goods, and, tragically, the plague. Trade caravans, military campaigns, and bustling markets became unsuspecting conduits for the bacteria, allowing it to travel at an alarming pace across continents. As merchants and travelers moved along the Silk Road, they unknowingly carried the plague with them, spreading it from one city to another. The disease, primarily transmitted by fleas that infested rats, thrived in the crowded trade hubs of the time. Cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, Constantinople, and Cairo, once vibrant centers of commerce, became breeding grounds for infection. Merchant ships, packed with goods and overrun with rats, carried the plague across the Mediterranean, ensuring its reach extended even further. During their siege of Kaffa, a key trading port in Crimea, they reportedly catapulted plague-infected corpses over the city walls, an act that may have directly contributed to the disease's arrival in Europe. The port of Kaffa, deeply connected to Mediterranean trade, soon became a launching point for the plague's westward march. The effects were catastrophic. Samarkand and Bukhara, crucial nodes on the Silk Road, bore the brunt of the disease as merchants from China, Persia, and Europe unknowingly passed it along. Persia, the Levant, and North Africa were next, as trade routes and pilgrimage roads carried the infection deep into the Islamic world. Egypt, a major player in Silk Road commerce, suffered immensely. In Cairo and Alexandria, two of the most important trading cities of the medieval world, the plague caused staggering losses, crippling economic activity, and disrupting the flow of goods. The disease continued its relentless expansion, reaching the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and Russia, before finally entering Europe in 1348. In Italy, the first outbreaks were recorded in Sicily and Venice, brought by trading ships returning from the east. From there, the Black Death spread like wildfire. France, Spain, England, and the Low Countries soon fell victim, with entire communities wiped out in its wake. The impact on Silk Road trade was devastating. Europe, already suffering from political and economic instability, saw its population reduced by nearly 1/3. Major cities such as Florence, Paris, and London were paralyzed, their economies crumbling under the weight of labor shortages and mass deaths. With fewer merchants, artisans, and consumers, the once thriving demand for luxury goods from the East plummeted. Markets closed, caravans stopped arriving, and trade networks that had once been the lifeblood of civilizations began to wither. The once prosperous merchant families of Europe found themselves in ruin, unable to continue their businesses as entire towns and cities succumbed to the plague. The Italian city-states of Venice and Genoa, dominant forces in Mediterranean trade, also suffered severe setbacks. However, even as the overland routes of the Silk Road declined, a transformation was already underway. In the aftermath of the Black Death, maritime trade began to take precedence over land-based commerce. This shift would ultimately reshape global trade, paving the way for the age of exploration and the rise of new commercial empires that navigated the oceans rather than the deserts and mountains of the Silk Road. The once mighty Silk Road, which had been the backbone of Eurasian trade for centuries, faced an irreversible decline in the wake of the Black Death. As populations dwindled and labor forces collapsed, the great Central Asian cities that had thrived as trade hubs, Samarkand, Bukhara, and others, began to lose their power and influence. These once bustling centers of commerce and culture fell into ruin, their prosperity eroded by depopulation and economic turmoil. The Mongol Empire, which had once unified vast territories under Pax Mongolica and ensured the stability of trade routes, was now crumbling under the weight of plague-induced devastation. With entire communities wiped out, the network that had once kept the Silk Road operational began to fragment. The loss of population weakened centralized control, and as the Mongol grip loosened, the interconnected trade routes that had linked east and west were gradually abandoned. The once thriving land routes now lay desolate, and European powers, facing the growing difficulty of navigating these disrupted passages, turned their attention toward the seas, searching for alternative routes to access the riches of Asia. But disease alone didn't bring the downfall. The Mongol Empire, once the Silk Road's greatest protector, fractured. As their rule weakened, stability collapsed into chaos. Without strong central control, banditry, local conflicts, and political instability made long-distance trade increasingly dangerous. The once secure pathways between east and west became perilous, forcing merchants to abandon them. With the Silk Road fading into obscurity, traders and rulers sought alternatives. The decline accelerated with the rise of the Ottoman Empire, which tightened its grip over former Byzantine territories in North Africa. The Ottomans imposed heavy tolls and trade restrictions, making overland commerce increasingly difficult for European merchants. The weakened trade networks, already struggling from depopulation and economic collapse, now faced yet another obstacle that sealed their fate. The plague had devastated Eurasia, but it also marked the dawn of a new era. As land routes became unreliable, European powers turned to the seas. The Portuguese, eager to bypass the dangers of land travel, pioneered new maritime routes along the African coast. The Spanish soon followed, launching transatlantic voyages in search of direct access to Asia. This thirst for alternative trade networks ignited the age of exploration, a new phase of global commerce that redefined history. The fall of the Silk Road wasn't just the collapse of a trade network, it marked the end of an era. The combined forces of the Black Death, political fragmentation, and economic decline dismantled the once thriving land-based commerce system. Cities that had been vibrant centers of cultural and commercial exchange fell into ruin, their influence fading as global trade shifted toward the seas. The wealth that once flowed through the heart of Eurasia now moved through maritime routes, signaling the rise of a new world order. Yet, even as the world's economic center of gravity shifted to the oceans, one city still stood at the crossroads of East and West, Constantinople. For centuries, it had been a hub of trade, diplomacy, and power, resilient against wars and shifting empires. But as the Silk Road's decline deepened, so did the struggles of this once mighty metropolis. With the collapse of overland trade, Constantinople found itself in a precarious position. The city, once flourishing due to its strategic location, struggled to recover from devastating population losses and economic stagnation. The Byzantine Empire, already weakened by internal strife and territorial losses, lost access to the prosperity that had once sustained it. At the same time, the rise of maritime trade eroded Constantinople's influence. European powers, eager to secure direct access to the riches of the East, bypassed traditional overland routes in favor of sea-based trade. Portuguese and Spanish explorers charted new paths around Africa and across the Atlantic, diminishing the importance of trade hubs like Constantinople. As wealth and commerce shifted toward maritime empires, the Byzantine capital grew increasingly isolated, its economy deteriorating under the weight of declining revenues and external threats. With its fortunes fading, Constantinople became vulnerable. The once thriving city, now economically drained and militarily weakened, no longer commanded the power it once held. The Ottomans saw an opportunity not just to conquer a strategic city, but to cement their dominance over the remnants of the Silk Road. In 1453, after centuries of decline, Constantinople faced its greatest siege yet, one that not only marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but also sealed the fate of overland trade between East and West. The fall of Constantinople. Led by Sultan Mehmed II, the Ottomans launched a meticulously planned siege, determined to bring down the last bastion of the Byzantine world. For centuries, Constantinople had been the linchpin of the Silk Road, a gateway between cultures, ideas, and commerce. But by the mid-15th century, the city stood as a shadow of its former self. The Byzantine Empire, weakened by internal strife and external threats, could no longer hold back the rising Ottoman tide. The Ottomans had long been a formidable force, steadily expanding their empire through the 14th and early 15th centuries. Now, their ambitions centered on Constantinople. More than just a strategic conquest, its fall would mark the consolidation of Ottoman power and the unification of the trade routes that had once fueled Eurasian commerce. On May 22, 1453, after weeks of relentless bombardment and siege, Constantinople fell, The city's formidable walls, which had withstood invasions for over 1,000 years, were no match for the Ottomans' advanced artillery and siege tactics. The fall of Constantinople was a pivotal moment in history as it marked the end of Christian rule in the region and the rise of the Ottomans as a dominant power in the eastern Mediterranean. The city's strategic position, once a hub of commerce, culture, and religion, was now firmly in the hands of a Muslim empire. This dramatic shift altered the entire balance of power between East and West and had profound repercussions for trade, particularly along the Silk Road. The capture of Constantinople by the Ottomans not only impacted the Byzantine Empire and its people, but also profoundly affected global trade routes. For centuries, Constantinople had been a central node in the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and knowledge between Europe and Asia. With the Ottomans now in control of the city, they established their dominance over the vital trade routes that passed through it. The Ottomans imposed heavy taxes on goods traveling through their newly acquired lands, including those passing through Constantinople, and this had an immediate impact on trade between Europe and Asia. The once thriving commercial center of the Mediterranean was now under a new order, one that was less interested in facilitating the free flow of goods to the west, and more focused on consolidating Ottoman control and wealth. For European merchants, the fall of Constantinople was a disaster. The traditional overland routes to the east were now under Ottoman control, and the possibility of trading directly with Asia through the city became increasingly limited. The Ottomans also made it more difficult for Christian merchants to access the lucrative markets of the east, creating a sense of urgency among European powers to seek new trade routes to bypass Ottoman control. The fall of Constantinople ultimately prompted the Age of Exploration, as European nations like Portugal and Spain sought new maritime routes to reach Asia. They realized that to maintain their access to the riches of the East, they needed to find alternative pathways to the Spice Islands, India, and China. Thus, the fall not only marked the end of an empire, but also brought about the closing of one chapter in the Silk Road's history, pushing the world into the next phase of global exploration and trade. The shift from overland trade to sea trade became inevitable, with the Ottomans' control over the eastern Mediterranean prompting Europeans to turn to the oceans in search of new routes to the east. The collapse of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire had a profound impact on both the political and economic landscape of the time. The Ottoman Empire's dominance over the Silk Road's overland routes marked the end of an era, but it also set the stage for the dawn of the Age of Exploration, a period that would forever change the world. The Ottoman control over the land routes following the fall of Constantinople in 1453 had a transformative effect not only on the Silk Road, but also on the global economic landscape. The Ottomans, under the leadership of Mehmed II and subsequent sultans, inherited one of the most strategically vital regions of the ancient world. Constantinople, with its commanding position straddling both Europe and Asia, became a focal point of Ottoman imperial power. From this moment on, the Ottoman Empire effectively controlled the overland trade routes that had for centuries connected the East to the West, positioning themselves as the primary gatekeepers of this commercial nexus. These routes were no longer simply pathways for the transportation of goods, but rather sources of immense political, economic, and military power. The Ottomans recognized the wealth that flowed through these routes and sought to capitalize on it by imposing taxes and tariffs on merchants. The wealth from taxes would be used to fund not only their expansionist military campaigns, but also the maintenance of their growing empire. Cities along the trade routes, particularly Constantinople, Edirne, and Baghdad, flourished as Ottoman-controlled trade hubs. However, the Ottomans didn't just benefit from the taxes on goods like silk, spices, and precious metals that had long been the backbone of the Silk Road trade. The tolls and fees placed on the caravanserais, those essential inns where merchants rested and exchanged goods, added another layer of revenue to the Ottoman coffers. Every movement of goods through their lands was seen as an opportunity to extract wealth. Luxury items such as silk and rare spices carried the highest taxes, further inflating the already steep costs of doing business within Ottoman territory. For European traders, this heavy financial burden made it increasingly difficult to maintain profit margins, fueling resentment toward Ottoman rule. The empire's monopoly over these vital trade routes severely restricted European powers, limiting their ability to trade freely and efficiently with Asia. At the same time, these taxes deepened economic divisions. The Ottoman elite reaped immense profits, while European merchants, who had once enjoyed relatively unrestricted trade with Central Asia and the Far East, found themselves increasingly constrained. This economic strain forced European nations to seek alternatives, sparking new ambitions that ignited the age of exploration. Despite mounting discontent in Europe, the Ottomans thrived on their dominance over trade. Their strategic location allowed them to control the flow of goods and exert influence over broader regional trade policies. Recognizing the power of commerce, Ottoman rulers went beyond taxation, implementing measures to ensure that trade within their empire remained prosperous. They provided safety for merchants, offered protection even to foreign traders, and maintained stability despite the wars and political turmoil that often disrupted other regions. In some cases, the Ottomans granted tax exemptions to attract traders, ensuring a continuous flow of goods through their territories. To further streamline commerce, the Ottomans introduced key innovations, such as a standardized coinage system that simplified transactions for merchants from different regions. By centralizing tax collection and trade management, they fostered a more predictable economic environment, one that attracted merchants from as far as India, China, and Africa. This efficient system played a crucial role in the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a global power. Yet, for European traders, the ever-increasing taxes and restrictions became an unbearable obstacle, pushing them to seek new routes to Asia. By the late 15th century, European explorers sought alternative routes to Asia, avoiding the challenges posed by overland trade. In 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail, intending to reach Asia by crossing the Atlantic, but instead discovering the Americas. Just a few years later, in 1498, Vasco da Gama successfully navigated around the Cape of Good Hope, opening a direct sea route to India. This breakthrough shattered the Ottoman monopoly over trade with the East, and proved that maritime routes could replace overland caravans. The age of exploration had begun, and with it, the balance of global commerce shifted. While the Ottomans profited immensely from controlling the Silk Road, their dominance inadvertently accelerated the decline of overland trade routes. The very monopoly they sought to maintain led European powers to forge new paths, routes that reshaped the world. The Ottomans, once the gatekeepers of East-West trade, watched as European maritime empires rose to dominance, relegating the Silk Road to a relic of the past. The age of exploration was not just a quest for alternative trade routes. It was an era of ambition, discovery, and the relentless pursuit of wealth. At its core was Europe's hunger for Eastern luxuries, silk, spices, and other treasures that had long defined Silk Road commerce. As Ottoman taxes and trade restrictions tightened, the pressure to find direct access to these goods without interference became overwhelming. Portugal and Spain took decisive action. Positioned at the western edge of Europe, both nations had a natural advantage for maritime expansion. Under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, Portugal pioneered long-distance exploration, developing new navigational techniques and advanced ship designs. Determined to bypass Ottoman-controlled territories, the Portuguese launched expeditions along the African coast, searching for a sea route to the riches of Asia. Their breakthrough came in 1497 when Vasco da Gama set sail for India. Navigating around Africa's southern tip, he successfully reached the Indian subcontinent, forging a direct trade link with Asia. This achievement dismantled the Ottoman trade monopoly and gave Europe unrestricted access to the lucrative markets of the East. The Portuguese wasted no time establishing fortified trading posts along the coasts of Africa and Asia, cementing their dominance over the Indian Ocean. Meanwhile, Spain pursued its own ambitions across the Atlantic. Christopher Columbus's 1492 voyage, though intended to reach Asia, instead revealed the vast, uncharted lands of the Americas. Though this did not provide an immediate alternative to the Silk Road, it opened the door to Spanish expansion in the New World. Over the following decades, Spain launched further explorations, eventually laying the foundation for one of the most powerful colonial empires in history. As the 16th century progressed, the maritime rivalry between Portugal and Spain intensified. Both sought to dominate global trade, directly challenging the Ottomans' grip on commerce. The shift from overland to sea routes drastically altered the flow of wealth, rendering the traditional Silk Road increasingly obsolete. Spices and silk, once transported via caravans across Asia, now arrived directly in European ports, bypassing Ottoman-controlled territories entirely. Yet Portugal and Spain were only the beginning. Other European powers, most notably the Dutch, English, and French, entered the race, establishing vast overseas empires and securing control over critical trade networks. While the overland routes retained some importance, the real transformation in global commerce came with the rise of the Indian Ocean trade. This maritime network opened vast new channels for the exchange of goods, cultures, and ideas, laying the foundation for a new economic era. The Indian Ocean trade had flourished for centuries before European intervention. Merchants from the Arabian Peninsula, India, China, Southeast Asia, and East Africa had long exchanged goods across the vast waters of the Indian Ocean. The arrival of European powers disrupted this balance. The Portuguese, having successfully navigated a direct route to India, positioned themselves as dominant players in the region. Other European powers followed, seeking control over the spice trade and securing access to the riches of Southeast Asia, India, and beyond. The geography of the Indian Ocean made it a natural hub for trade, linking key commercial centers across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Ports such as Malacca, Calicut, Zanzibar, and Hormuz had long served as thriving trade crossroads where goods from different parts of the world converged. The establishment of European-controlled trading posts and fortified settlements along these routes reshaped the existing network, shifting power to European naval forces. No longer just a passage for silk and spices, the Indian Ocean transformed into the epicenter of a new global economy, driven by European ambitions. Several key factors fueled this transformation. First, the rise of powerful European navies allowed for the protection and expansion of maritime trade routes. The Portuguese built a network of fortresses along the East African coast and in the Indian subcontinent to secure critical trade points. The Dutch and English followed, establishing their own strategic settlements in key locations. Second, the demand for luxury goods, especially spices like pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, pushed European nations deeper into the Indian Ocean trade network. The quest to monopolize these lucrative commodities led to fierce competition, further embedding Europeans in the region's economic framework. The shift from the Silk Road to the Indian Ocean trade reshaped not just economies, but cultures. The Indian Ocean became a conduit for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and traditions between East and West. European traders introduced their customs and innovations to Asia, while Eastern goods and philosophies flowed into Europe, influencing everything from art and architecture to science and philosophy. But this exchange also carried darker consequences. The expansion of European trade networks fueled the growth of the slave trade, with enslaved Africans being transported to the Middle East, India, and the Far East, entangling the region in a brutal system of commerce and exploitation. The expansion of European colonialism, driven by control of these trade networks, redefined the geopolitical landscape and cemented European dominance over global commerce. As the world grew increasingly interconnected, the Indian Ocean trade evolved, linking distant civilizations through the exchange of goods, cultures, and ideas. The Silk Road, though diminished, lived on in a new form, its legacy carried forward by the ships that now crossed the seas. What had once been a vast overland network of caravans had transformed into a dynamic maritime system that redefined global trade for generations. This transition marked the closing of one era and the opening of another. The world, once bound by the limitations of land routes, embraced the power of the sea. European dominance in the Indian Ocean trade shaped economies, cultures, and politics in ways that still resonate today. Yet even as maritime trade took center stage, the legacy of the Silk Road remained deeply ingrained in the cultural and linguistic fabric of the civilizations it had touched. More than just a route for goods, the Silk Road had been a bridge for languages, traditions, and ideas, a testament to the enduring power of human connection across vast distances. One of the most profound impacts of the Silk Road was the creation of trade languages, or lingua franca, which enabled communication across diverse cultures. Sogdian, an ancient Iranian language, became the dominant trade language in Central Asia. spoken not only by Persians, but also by Turks, Chinese, and Indians. Sogdian's widespread use in commerce across such varied populations was akin to how English functions today in the global market, acting as a unifying language that facilitated exchanges between people who spoke completely different native languages. Similarly, other regional languages, such as Middle Persian and Khotanese Saga, played vital roles in connecting communities along the Silk Road. These languages were essential for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange, often serving as a bridge for people from distant lands to communicate and engage with one another. Alongside these linguistic exchanges, the spread of writing systems also left a lasting mark. For instance, the Arabic script, which originated in the Arabian Peninsula, expanded across Central Asia and into India as the Islamic faith and its scholars journeyed along the Silk Road. By the 8th century, the Arabic script was not just used for religious purposes, but had become integral to trade, administration, and everyday life in regions such as Transoxiana, where cities like Bukhara and Samarkand became hubs of cultural exchange. Likewise, Chinese characters spread by Buddhist monks influenced the written communication in Central Asia and even made their way into the Roman Empire, fostering a shared understanding that transcended geographical boundaries. This linguistic melting pot was further enriched by the incorporation of loanwords as cultures adapted to one another's vocabulary. Arabic words related to science, astronomy, and mathematics found their way into Persian, Turkish, and Indian languages, and many of these terms still persist in modern dialects today. This cultural exchange did not just leave its mark on spoken languages, but also on the written word, shaping the intellectual landscapes of vast regions. But perhaps the most significant legacy of the Silk Road's cultural and linguistic exchanges lies in the cross-cultural marriages that flourished along these trade routes. As people from diverse backgrounds came into contact, often due to trade, diplomacy, or migration, intermarriage became a common feature of Silk Road societies. These unions were not only about individual relationships, but also about the blending of cultures, languages, and traditions, giving rise to new communities that embodied the diversity of the regions they spanned. In the oasis cities of Central Asia, where trade routes converged, marriages between Persian, Turkic, Chinese, Indian, and Mongol peoples led to the formation of multicultural societies. These unions played a critical role in integrating various cultural elements, resulting in vibrant, hybrid communities that were more cosmopolitan than any one culture could have produced on its own. Such cross-cultural interactions brought about a fusion of artistic styles, culinary practices, and social customs, creating a rich, shared cultural legacy. For instance, in China, the influx of Central Asian traders resulted in marriages between Han Chinese and nomadic steppe tribes. These unions introduced new customs, rituals, and artistic expressions to Chinese society, creating a more cosmopolitan culture that integrated influences from the steppes. Similarly, Persian merchants who traveled the Silk Road often married local women from India and China, creating hybrid communities that played a crucial role in bridging the gap between different cultures. These communities facilitated trade, knowledge exchange, and the spread of cultural innovations across vast distances. Religious exchanges also played an important role in cross-cultural marriages, as different belief systems came into contact with one another. Buddhist monks, for example, encountered Christian missionaries along the trade routes, leading to exchanges of religious ideas and practices that shaped the religious fabric of regions across Asia and Europe. These marriages and the cultural fusion they created were essential in fostering the continued flow of goods, ideas, and innovations along the Silk Road. The descendants of these unions, raised in households where multiple languages, traditions, and customs were embraced, played pivotal roles in the diffusion of knowledge, art, and culture across Eurasia. In the end, the linguistic and cultural exchanges along the Silk Road laid the foundation for the interconnected world we know today. The languages spoken, the traditions followed, and the communities formed along these ancient trade routes still echo in the diverse societies of Eurasia, leaving an indelible mark on the cultural identity of nations from China to the Mediterranean. These enduring legacies remind us that the Silk Road was not just a network of trade, but also a conduit for the blending of civilizations, a process that continues to influence global culture in the 21st century modern era. Beyond language and traditions, the Silk Road's influence on Eurasian food, music, and customs is a testament to the immense cultural exchange that took place along these historic trade routes. As merchants, travelers, and missionaries journeyed across vast distances, they didn't just transport goods. They carried flavors, sounds, and traditions that shaped civilizations. The Silk Road wasn't merely a conduit for spices and silks, it was a vibrant highway for cultural diffusion, blending arts, cuisine, and rituals across continents. Food was one of the most tangible and beloved forms of cultural exchange. As spices, fruits, and grains traveled across the continents, they transformed local cuisines, leaving a lasting mark on the culinary traditions of Central Asia, the Middle East, India, and China. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and black pepper moved from the east to the west, becoming highly sought-after commodities in European kitchens. These exotic flavors, often mixed with indigenous ingredients, redefined the way people season their food. The introduction of Chinese 5-spice powder and ginger to the Mediterranean, for example, altered meat preparation techniques, particularly in stews and soups, creating entirely new layers of taste. The exchange of fruits and grains was equally transformative. The Chinese introduced rice, tea, and soybeans to Central Asia and the Middle East, while the Mediterranean supplied citrus fruits, grapes, and pomegranates to Asia. These crops didn't just enrich diets, they shaped agriculture along the Silk Road, with staple grains like millet, oats, and wheat becoming essential in many regions. The spread of noodles, dumplings, and pasta was another defining feature of this culinary fusion. Noodles, originating in China, traveled westward and eventually influenced Italian pasta, which bears striking similarities in both form and cooking technique. Beverages, too, followed the Silk Road's vast network. Tea, first cultivated in China, spread to Central Asia, the Middle East, and eventually Europe, where it became deeply ingrained in social rituals. It symbolized hospitality, ceremony, and even status, as seen in elaborate Persian tea houses and the formalized British tea culture that developed centuries later. Meanwhile, coffee, which originated in Ethiopia and Yemen, traveled through the Middle East and Central Asia, becoming an essential part of daily life in Ottoman coffee houses. These spaces became social and intellectual hubs, where poets, merchants, and scholars gathered, further highlighting the Silk Road's role in shaping global traditions. Buddhist chanting, which originated in India, spread to China and Central Asia, while the Islamic call to prayer became a defining feature of musical heritage in the Middle East and Central Asia. These traditions not only enriched religious and ceremonial music, but also shaped artistic expression across cultures. Beyond food and music, the Silk Road played a profound role in shaping cultural traditions, blending beliefs, rituals, and artistic expressions. The trade routes served as meeting points for diverse faiths, where Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Zoroastrianism spread and adapted to local customs. Buddhist monasteries along the Silk Road became centers of learning, where travelers and monks exchanged ideas that shaped regional beliefs. Meanwhile, the spread of Islam across Central Asia and India led to the fusion of Islamic customs with local traditions, influencing everything from architecture to daily rituals. Religious festivals, too, evolved through cultural interaction. Nowruz, the Persian New Year, became a widespread celebration among Turkic, Persian, and Central Asian societies. This ancient holiday, rooted in Zoroastrian traditions, later absorbed Islamic and local cultural elements, transforming into a shared pan-Eurasian event. In India, Persian artistic influences helped shape the Mughal era's poetry, painting, and courtly traditions, demonstrating the deep cultural synthesis brought about by the Silk Road. This blending of traditions extended into architecture and the visual arts. The introduction of Islamic architectural styles into Central Asia led to the construction of breathtaking mosques and madrasas. These structures featured intricate tile work, towering arches, and elaborate geometric designs, blending Persian, Islamic, and local influences. As the Silk Road gradually gave way to the dominance of the Indian Ocean trade routes, the cultural and culinary exchanges it facilitated did not vanish. Instead, they left an indelible mark on the societies of Eurasia. The fusion of food traditions, musical influences, and cultural customs that emerged from the Silk Road has continued to shape the identities of nations across the region. From the aromatic spices that flavor dishes across the Middle East and India, to the intricate melodies played on stringed instruments in Central Asia, the legacy of the Silk Road's cultural exchange remains deeply embedded in the world's artistic and culinary traditions. The intermingling of diverse cultures along the Silk Road helped to foster a sense of interconnectedness that continues to resonate today, reminding us that through trade, travel, and human interaction, we shape not only the goods we share, but the very cultures we belong to. The languages spoken, the traditions followed, and the communities formed along these trade networks still echo in the diverse societies of Eurasia, leaving an indelible mark on the cultural identity of nations from China to the Mediterranean. These enduring legacies remind us that the Silk Road was not just a network of trade, but also a conduit for the blending of civilizations, a process that continues to influence global culture in the modern era. In the 21st century, China is spearheading a new vision of global trade through its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Often referred to as the New Silk Road, this initiative seeks to revive and expand the global trade routes that once made the ancient Silk Road the heartbeat of intercontinental commerce. Launched in 2013 under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, the BRI represents a modern reincarnation of the historic trade networks, with a renewed focus on infrastructure development, economic partnerships, and cultural collaboration across Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. At its core, the Belt and Road Initiative seeks to improve global trade by creating a network of roads, railways, ports, and airports that facilitate the easy movement of goods and services across vast regions. However, it extends beyond physical infrastructure, emphasizing financial and cultural exchanges among participating nations. China envisions the BRI as a win-win strategy, where both developing and developed nations benefit from increased trade, economic growth, and stronger diplomatic ties. Much like its ancient predecessor, the BRI is positioned to redefine global commerce. The initiative comes as a response to the growing need for greater connectivity in an increasingly interdependent world economy. With over $1 trillion in pledged investments, China is leading one of the largest infrastructure development projects in history, a venture that is expected to shape the global economic landscape for decades to come. One of the most striking aspects of the Belt and Road Initiative is its sheer scale, with China committing massive financial resources to the development of roads, railways, ports, and power plants. The project aims to uplift regions traditionally underserved by modern infrastructure. These investments are not just about improving trade routes. They reflect China's growing economic and geopolitical ambitions. By establishing a vast network of trade corridors, China is positioning itself at the center of a global trade revolution, much like the Silk Road once did. The Belt and Road Initiative is divided into two primary components: the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st century Maritime Silk Road. The Silk Road Economic Belt focuses on overland trade routes that connect China to Central Asia, Russia, and Europe. By developing high-speed railways, highways, pipelines, and industrial zones, this initiative seeks to restore the land-based corridors that once fueled commerce along the ancient Silk Road. Meanwhile, the 21st century Maritime Silk Road is centered around enhancing China's maritime trade network, linking Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, and Europe. Investments in key ports, shipping lanes, and logistics hubs have made China a dominant player in global maritime trade, much like the great trading cities of the Silk Road era once were. The infrastructure projects driving the Belt and Road Initiative are expected to be transformative. By improving connectivity across vast regions, these developments aim to reduce transportation costs, increase trade volumes, and enhance global supply chains. Massive investments in high-speed rail networks across Central Asia, South Asia, and Eastern Europe are reducing travel times and fostering closer economic ties. Strategic maritime hubs, including Gwadar in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and Mombasa in Kenya, are strengthening China's presence in global trade. Additionally, Large-scale energy projects, such as oil and gas pipelines from Central Asia and Russia, are reshaping regional energy security, while renewable energy initiatives like solar farms and wind power plants highlight China's long-term commitment to sustainable development. While the Belt and Road Initiative offers significant economic benefits, it is not without controversy. Critics argue that the project may lead to economic dependency on China, as many developing nations struggle to repay the large loans associated with BRI infrastructure projects. Additionally, concerns over environmental sustainability and geopolitical maneuvering have sparked debates about the broader implications of China's growing influence through the initiative. Nonetheless, just as the ancient Silk Road shaped the world for centuries, the Belt and Road Initiative stands as a testament to the enduring power of trade, connectivity, and cultural exchange. Whether it becomes a bridge to prosperity or a tool of geopolitical leverage, the new Silk Road is undoubtedly reshaping the global order, echoing the transformative impact of its ancient predecessor. Yet, while the Silk Road's influence unfolded over centuries, the BRI is unfolding at an unprecedented pace, bringing both opportunities and challenges that will determine its long-term success. As the modern world continues to evolve, the Belt and Road Initiative remains at a crossroads. Still in its early stages, its long-term impact on global trade and infrastructure is already becoming evident. More than just an economic initiative, the BRI is a strategic endeavor that extends China's influence across continents, redefining global trade routes and geopolitical alliances. However, its success will ultimately depend on how effectively China navigates the economic, political, and environmental challenges that accompany such a vast undertaking. Regardless of its final outcome, the BRI stands as one of the most significant geopolitical projects in modern history, with the potential to reshape global power dynamics for generations to come. Long before the BRI, ancient networks such as the Silk Road, the Incense Route, and the Trans-Saharan trade routes served as the arteries of civilizations, linking distant regions and fostering economic interdependence. These trade routes not only enabled commerce, but also laid the foundation for diplomatic and political alliances, shaping the world's balance of power in ways that continue to echo in the present day. Perhaps the most famous of these, the Silk Road, played a pivotal role in shaping human history. Beyond facilitating the exchange of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals, it became a conduit for ideas, religions, technologies, and even diseases. It was more than a commercial pathway. It was a cultural and diplomatic bridge that connected the Han Dynasty of China, the Persian and Roman empires, and various Central Asian and Middle Eastern civilizations. Today, the Belt and Road Initiative represents a modern reincarnation of this ancient route, transforming infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Europe through the development of roads, railways, ports, and energy projects. In many ways, the economic influence China seeks to establish today mirrors the strategic importance of the ancient Silk Road, reinforcing how trade has long been a means of consolidating global power. This revival of historical trade networks is not merely an economic venture, it is redefining political alignments. Central Asian nations like Kazakhstan and Pakistan, once vital waypoints on the ancient Silk Road, have now become critical hubs for China's expansion, reflecting their historical roles in global trade. As Beijing strengthens its ties with these regions, economic cooperation increasingly translates into political influence, reshaping traditional alliances and shifting the global order toward an era where China's economic ambitions dictate new geopolitical realities. Beyond Asia, the echoes of ancient trade networks are also visible in Africa and the Middle East. The Incense Route, which once linked the Arabian Peninsula with the Mediterranean and parts of Africa, was a key driver of economic and political power. Today, the region remains a focal point of global energy markets, with oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE continuing to wield significant influence over the world economy. Just as the ancient Incense Route determined the wealth and strategic importance of certain regions, the geopolitical struggles of the modern era reflect a similar dynamic. The United States, Russia, and China all compete for dominance in these historically significant crossroads, mirroring the fierce competition of empires in centuries past. As history has shown, trade routes are never just about commerce. lifelines of civilization, shaping economies, cultures, and global power structures. Whether through the ancient Silk Road, the incense route, or today's Belt and Road Initiative, the ability to control and influence these networks has always been a defining factor in geopolitical dominance. The modern world, much like the ancient one, continues to be shaped by the flow of goods, ideas, and power, proving that while the routes may change, their significance remains timeless. Nonetheless, just as the ancient Silk Road shaped the world for centuries, the Belt and Road Initiative stands as a testament to the enduring power of trade, connectivity, and cultural exchange. Whether it becomes a bridge to prosperity or a tool of geopolitical leverage, the new Silk Road is undoubtedly reshaping the global order, echoing the transformative impact of its ancient predecessor. This enduring influence is also evident in the trans-Saharan trade routes, which stretched across the vast desert from the Mediterranean to sub-Saharan Africa, connecting North Africa with powerful kingdoms such as Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. These routes facilitated the exchange of gold, salt, and other valuable resources, fueling the prosperity of the empires that controlled them. However, their impact extended beyond mere economic wealth. They also served as conduits for cultural and intellectual exchange, bringing Islamic influences into West Africa and giving rise to influential Islamic empires. Even today, the legacy of these trade networks continues to shape Africa's geopolitical landscape. Positioned at the crossroads of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, the continent remains a strategic focal point, rich in natural resources such as oil, gas, and minerals. Emerging global powers like China and India recognize this significance, competing for influence through large-scale infrastructure projects and trade agreements. The trans-Saharan region itself is becoming increasingly vital as China develops transport corridors and energy pipelines, securing access to Africa's vast resources. In response, regional organizations like the African Union, along with individual nations, are seeking to leverage their historical trading routes to enhance economic and political integration. The interconnectedness between past and present trade routes highlights how Africa's geopolitical significance remains deeply rooted in its ancient trading past. Just as land-based trade routes like the Trans-Saharan Network connected empires and shaped civilizations, maritime trade routes have also played a crucial role in shaping global power structures. Since ancient times, civilizations such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, and Romans relied on maritime networks to connect Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, fostering not only trade, but also the exchange of ideas, culture, and political influence. The Mediterranean Sea became a hub for empire building, with dominant maritime powers like Venice, Genoa, and later Spain and Portugal using their naval strength to control critical sea lanes. This strategic importance has persisted into the modern era, where key maritime routes continue to dictate geopolitical dynamics. The Suez Canal, a vital link between Europe and Asia, remains a choke point for global trade, particularly oil shipments, much as it was in ancient times. Countries like Egypt, Turkey, and Greece, which sit along these vital sea lanes, continue to wield influence over global commerce due to their strategic positions. Meanwhile, competition for naval dominance and control over maritime trade remains a defining feature of modern geopolitics. China's naval expansion, particularly through its Belt and Road Initiative investments in strategic ports like Djibouti and Sri Lanka, mirrors the ambitions of ancient maritime empires, reinforcing the idea that control over trade routes has always been a key determinant of global power. Ultimately, the geopolitical realities of today are deeply intertwined with the ancient trade paths that once facilitated the movement of goods, culture, and influence across continents. From the Silk Road to the Trans-Saharan routes, these historic connections laid the foundation for the modern global order. As nations invest in infrastructure, forge strategic alliances, and compete for dominance over key trade routes, the echoes of these ancient networks continue to shape the world. Whether through China's Belt and Road Initiative or the ongoing struggle for control over maritime choke points, history reminds us that geopolitics is, at its core, an enduring narrative of power, trade, and influence, one that stretches across centuries and continues to evolve with the modern world. As we come to the end of this exploration of the Silk Road and other ancient trade routes, we cannot ignore the profound impact that trade has had on shaping the course of human history. From the exchange of goods to the spread of culture, ideas, and innovations, trade has been the bridge between civilizations, fostering mutual growth and connection. The Silk Road, in particular, stands as a monumental example of how trade transcends borders, both geographical and cultural. It's a testament to humanity's capacity to connect, learn, and evolve together, laying the foundations for our interconnected world today. Reflecting on the power of trade in history, we see how it was not just the flow of material goods, but the exchange of knowledge, culture, and ideas that truly transformed societies. The Silk Road facilitated the spread of religions, philosophies, and technologies that still shape our world. From the spread of Buddhism and Islam to the transfer of technologies like papermaking and gunpowder, the Silk Road was a catalyst for cultural and intellectual growth. In a sense, trade along these ancient routes didn't just move goods, it moved ideas, shaping civilizations in ways we still feel today. The Silk Road remains highly relevant in today's world. The modern globalized economy continues to follow the pathways set by ancient trade networks, fostering new connections and global exchanges. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is a contemporary embodiment of the Silk Road's ambitions, reviving these ancient trade routes to facilitate economic growth, infrastructure development, and diplomatic ties across continents. Just as merchants once traveled from China to the Mediterranean, today's global trade connects regions in ways that echo those ancient exchanges, underscoring the enduring legacy of the Silk Road in today's interconnected world. When we look back at the past, there are valuable lessons that we can apply to our present. The Silk Road teaches us that cooperation and mutual exchange can build lasting relationships that transcend cultural and geographical boundaries. Today, as nations become more divided and nationalistic, the story of the Silk Road reminds us of the power of collaboration. The exchange of goods, knowledge, and culture has always been the foundation of progress, and in our modern world, we must continue to foster these exchanges for the benefit of all. In an era of uncertainty and division, the Silk Road's legacy is a beacon of hope, showing us that our collective future lies in cooperation, mutual respect, and shared growth. In conclusion, the Silk Road is not merely a symbol of ancient trade. It represents the timeless legacy of human connection and collaboration. The lessons from the past on the power of trade, the importance of global connectivity, and the value of cooperation are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. As we continue to navigate the complexities of global trade and geopolitics, we must remember that the Silk Road is not just a historical route, but a continuous journey of cultural exchange and mutual progress. Through the trade routes of yesterday, we shape the world of tomorrow.